you're giving. Step completely for your love. With dignity, fight for love. Step completely for your love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely for your love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely for your love. Warrior with dignity, fight for love. Now I know times can get real hard. Willing to stand apart from the mess that we have made. It's up to you. What will you create? When you keep the flame, take the time to pray. Then you will understand. You gotta completely warrior of love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely warrior of love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely warrior of love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely warrior of love. Warrior with dignity, fight for love. I don't know how to love when all I see is hate. I don't know where to go. I feel so alone. I don't know how to love when all I see is hate. I don't know where to go. I feel so alone. I don't know how to love when all I see is hate. I don't know where to go. I feel so alone. I don't know how to love when all I see is hate. I don't know where to go. I feel so alone. Completely warrior of love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely warrior of love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely warrior of love. She's calling you. She's calling you. It's calling all warriors with dignity. Fight for love. The earth is calling all warriors. The earth.
Hello, my name is Glory Edam, and I'm the founder of Well Read Black Girl. And I'm so enthralled with the words and wisdom of Toni Morrison. For me, she has always been a guiding light. I turn to her work when I need reassurance, when I need to just revisit the beauty of Black girlhood and in general Blackness. She just is so precise with her language. And the character of Bacola sits in my heart heavy because she was the first Black girl I saw on the page that I understood and I wanted to give so much empathy to. And I think so many people, when reading The Bluest Eye, have that same experience. They feel transfixed by the character and the world that she's built. And I'm so internally grateful for it. It's so amazing to have Morrison just be a beacon of light for so many readers.
Sunshine, you got me in my feelings. No one true love. You got me in my feelings. Sunshine.
something you can do to make this world a sacred space and live in truth. If you watch the birds, if you watch the bees, when you feel the sun, well, when you feel the breeze, you'll see they know what they're doing. You'll see, oh, 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 what about you? What about you? What about you? What about you? Can you feel what you're doing? Can you be what you're giving? Step completely for your love. With dignity, fight for love. Step completely for your love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely for your love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely for your love. Warriors with dignity, fight for love. Now I know something get real hard. Willing to stand apart from the mess that we have made. Up to you, what will you create? When you keep the faith, take the time to pray. Then you will understand. You gotta completely warrior of love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely warrior of love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely warrior of love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely warrior of love. It's calling all warriors with dignity, fight for love. I don't know how to love when all I see is hate. I don't know where to go. I feel so alone. I don't know how to love when all I see is hate. I don't know where to go. I feel so alone. I don't know how to love when all I see is hate. I don't know where to go. I feel so alone. I don't know how to love when all I see is hate. I don't know where to go. I feel so alone. Completely warrior of love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely warrior of love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely warrior of love. She's calling you. She's calling you. It's calling all warriors with dignity, fight for love. The earth is calling all warriors. The earth is calling all warriors. She's calling you. The earth is calling all warriors.
Hello, my name is Glory Edam, and I'm the founder of Well Read Black Girl. And I'm so enthralled with the words and wisdom of Toni Morrison. For me, she has always been a guiding light. I turn to her work when I need reassurance, when I need to just revisit the beauty of Black girlhood and in general Blackness. She just is so precise with her language. And the character of Bacola sits in my heart heavy because she was the first Black girl I saw on the page that I understood and I wanted to give so much empathy to. And I think so many people, when reading The Bluest Eye, have that same experience. They feel transfixed by the character and the world that she's built. And I'm so internally grateful for it. It's so amazing to have Morrison just be a beacon of light for so many readers.
Immediate action required. Leave color en route area for a maximum of 30 minutes. Dining room, kitchen, microwave room. Keep out of reach of children. Take 2 tablets orally every 5 hours as needed. Do not exceed 6 tablets daily. Thank you.
When parents can't read, children can't just be children. Literacy Partners is taking action, teaching parents to read. Parents like me.
I didn't read The Bluest Eye until I was an adult. I didn't grow up in a household that read a lot of Black authors or where I was exposed to Black writers. And I remember the first time that I read The Bluest Eye, and I had just not read someone who had wrote with such powerful and vibrant prose, and whose prose was just so beautiful, but also so painful. Some years after I first read The Bluest Eye, I looked up to see what did Toni Morrison herself say about this work. And one of the things that she said was she wrote The Bluest Eye because she wanted to show how hurtful racism is, and that she wanted to really discuss the way Black Americans had really been groomed to be apologetic about our Blackness, about the color of our skin, about the texture of our hair, about the shape of our noses and our lips, and that this was a forceful push against that. The thing that has always struck me about Toni Morrison's writing is the way that she wrote not just about Black people, but so clearly for Black people. This was not writing about Black people for white people. None of her writing was about Black people for white people. Toni Morrison wrote for Black people and rendered Black people as the universal, and invited white Americans and others who were not Black to indulge in these stories if they wanted to, but they were not the audience for her work. And I always found that to be extremely empowering and really the North Star for my own journalism.
Good evening. I'm Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our program. Over the next 3 hours, you will hear a reading of the first half of Toni Morrison's acclaimed novel, The Bluest Eye. I have the honor of starting tonight's program by reading from the foreword of the novel, which is a particularly significant passage because in it, Morrison lets us know directly what she was trying to accomplish with this extraordinary piece of literature and social critique. As you listen to the reading, I invite you to notice the fragility of Black girlhood, often marred by self-hatred and tainted by violence, and the many ways in which this text remains relevant even today, more than 50 years after the novel was first published. Tonight's program is made possible by Literacy Partners, an adult literacy program where African American and immigrant parents go to transform their lives through literacy education. I couldn't think of a more important mission for us to celebrate tonight. There can't be anyone, I'm sure, who doesn't know what it feels like to be disliked, even rejected, momentarily or for sustained periods of time. Perhaps the feeling is merely indifference, mild annoyance, but it may also be hurt. It may even be that some of us know what it is like to be actually hated for things we have no control over and cannot change. When this happens, it is some consolation to know that the dislike or hatred is unjustified, that you don't deserve it. And if you have the emotional strength and or support from family and friends, the damage is reduced or erased. We think of it as the stress, minor or disabling, that is part of life as a human. When I began writing The Bluest Eye, I was interested in something else. Not resistance to the contempt of others, ways to deflect it, but the far more tragic and disabling consequences of accepting rejection as legitimate, as self-evident. I knew that some victims of powerful self-loathing turn out to be dangerous, violent, reproducing the enemy who has humiliated them over and over. Others surrender their identity, melt into a structure that delivers the strong persona they lack. Most others, however, grow beyond it. But there are some who collapse silently, anonymously, with no voice to express or acknowledge it. They are invisible. The death of self-esteem can occur quickly, easily in children, before their ego has legs, so to speak. Couple the vulnerability of youth with indifferent parents, dismissive adults, and a world which, in its language, laws, and images, reinforces despair, and the journey to destruction is sealed. The project, then, for this, my first book, was to enter the life of the one least likely to withstand the damaging forces because of youth, gender, and race. Begun as a bleak narrative of psychological murder, the main character could not stand alone, since her passivity made her a narrative void. So I invented friends, classmates, who understood, even sympathized with her plight, but had the benefit of supportive parents and a feistiness all their own. Yet they were helpless as well. They could not save their friend from the world. She broke. The origin of the novel lay in a conversation I had with a childhood friend. We had just started elementary school. She said she wanted blue eyes. I looked around to picture her with them and was violently repelled by what I imagined she would look like if she had her wish. The sorrow in her voice seemed to call for sympathy, and I faked it for her. But astonished by the desecration she proposed, I got mad at her instead. Until that moment, I had seen the pretty, the lovely, the nice, the ugly, and although I had certainly used the word beautiful, I had never experienced its shock, the force of which was equaled by the knowledge that no one recognized it, not even or especially the one who possessed it. It must have been more than the face I was examining that afternoon. The silence of the street in the early afternoon. The light. The atmosphere of confession. In any case, it was the first time I knew beautiful, had imagined it for myself. Beauty was not simply something to behold, it was something one could do. The Bluest Eye was my effort to say something about that, to say something about why she had not, or possibly ever would have, the experience of what she possessed, and also why she prayed for so radical an alteration. Implicit in her desire was racial self-loathing. And 20 years later, I was still wondering about how one learns that. Who told her? Who made her feel that it was better to be a freak than what she was? Who had looked at her and found her so wanting, so small a weight on the beauty scale? The novel pecks away at the gaze that condemned her. The reclamation of racial beauty in the 60s stirred these thoughts, made me think about the necessity for the claim. Why, although reviled by others, could this beauty not be taken for granted within the community? Why did it need wide public articulation to exist? These are not clever questions, but in 1962, when I began this story, and in 1965, when it began to be a book, the answers were not as obvious to me as they quickly became and are now. The assertion of racial beauty was not a reaction to the self-mocking, humorous critique of cultural, racial foibles common in all groups, but against the damaging internalization of assumptions of immutable inferiority originating in an outside gaze. I focused, therefore, on how something as grotesque as the demonization of an entire race could take root inside the most delicate member of society, a child, the most vulnerable member, a female. In trying to dramatize the devastation that even casual racial contempt can cause, I chose a unique situation, not a representative one. The extremity of Piccola's case stemmed largely from a crippled and crippling family, unlike the average Black family and unlike the narrators. But singular as Piccola's life was, I believe some aspects of her woundability were lodged in all young girls. In exploring the social and domestic aggression that could cause a child to literally fall apart, I mounted a series of rejections, some routine, some exceptional, some monstrous, all while trying hard to avoid complicity in the demonization process Piccola was subjected to. Demonized the characters who trashed Piccola and contributed to her collapse. One problem was that centering the weight of the novel's inquiry on so delicate and vulnerable a character could smash her and lead readers into the comfort of pitying her rather than into an interrogation of themselves for the smashing. My solution: break the narrative into parts that had to be reassembled by the reader, seemed to me a good idea, the execution of which does not satisfy me now. Besides, it didn't work. Many readers remained touched, but not moved. The other problem, of course, was language. Holding the despising glance while sabotaging it was difficult. The novel tried to hit the raw nerve of racial self-contempt, expose it, then soothe it, not with narcotics, but with language that replicated the agency I discovered in my first experience of beauty. Because that moment was so racially infused, my revulsion at what my school friend wanted, very blue eyes in a very black skin, the harm she was doing to my concept of the beautiful, the struggle was for writing that was indisputably Black. I don't yet know quite what that is, but neither that nor the attempts to disqualify an effort to find out keeps me from trying to pursue it. My choices of language, speakerly, oral, colloquial, my reliance for full comprehension on codes embedded in Black culture, my effort to effect immediate co-conspiracy and intimacy without any distracting explanatory fabric, as well as my attempt to shape a silence while breaking it, are attempts to transfigure the complexity and wealth of Black American culture into a language worthy of the culture. Thinking back now on the problems expressive language presented to me, I am amazed by their currency, their tenacity. Hearing civilized languages debase humans, watching cultural exorcisms debase literature, seeing oneself preserved in the amber of disqualifying metaphors. I can say that my narrative project is as difficult today as it was then.
Here is the house. It is green and white. It has a red door. It is very pretty. Here is the family. Mother, father, Dick, and Jane live in the green and white house. They are very happy. See Jane. She has a red dress. She wants to play. Who will play with Jane? See the cat. It goes meow, meow. Come and play. Come play with Jane. The kitten will not play. See Mother? Mother is very nice. Mother, will you play with Jane? Mother laughs. Laugh, Mother, laugh. See Father? He is big and strong. Father, will you play with Jane? Father is smiling. Smile, Father, smile. See the dog? Bow wow goes the dog. Do you want to play with Jane? See the dog run. Run, dog, run. Look, look, here comes a friend. The friend will play with Jane. They will play a good game. Play, Jane, play. Here is the house. It is green and white. It has a red door. It is very pretty. Here is the family. Mother, father, Dick, and Jane live in the green and white house. They are very happy. See Jane. She has a red dress. She wants to play. Who will play with Jane? See the cat. It goes meow, meow. Come and play. Play with Jane. The kitten will not play. See Mother? Mother is very nice. Mother, will you play with Jane? Mother laughs. Laugh, Mother, laugh. See Father? He is big and strong. Father, will you play with Jane? Father is smiling. Smile, Father, smile. See the dog? Bow wow goes the dog. Do you want to play? Do you want to play with Jane? See the dog run. Run, dog, run. Look, look, here comes a friend. The friend will play with Jane. They will play a good game. Play, Jane, play. Here is the house. It is green and white. It has a red door. It is very pretty. Here is the family. Mother, father, Dick, and Jane live in the green and white house. They are very happy. See Jane. She has a red dress. She wants to play. Who will play with Jane? See the cat. It goes meow, meow. Come and play. Come play with Jane. The kitten will not play. See Mother? Mother is very nice. Mother, will you play with Jane? Mother laughs. Laugh, Mother, laugh. See Father? He is big and strong. Father, will you play with Jane? Father is smiling. Smile, Father, smile. See the dog? Dog goes bow wow. Do you want to play with Jane? See the dog run, 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 dog, run. Look, look, here comes a friend. The friend will play with Jane. They will play a good game. Play, Jane, play. Quiet it is kept. There were no marigolds in the fall of 1941. We thought at the time that it was because Bacola was having her father's baby that the marigolds did not grow. A little examination and much less melancholy would have proved to us that our seeds were not the only ones that did not sprout. Nobody's did. Not even the gardens fronting the lake showed marigolds that year. But so deeply concerned were we with the health and safe delivery of Bacola's baby, we could think of nothing but our own magic. If we planted the seeds and said the right words over them, they would blossom and everything would be all right. It was a long time before my sister and I admitted to ourselves that no green was going to spring from our seeds. Once we knew, our guilt was relieved only by fights and mutual accusations about who was to blame. For years, I thought my sister was right. It was my fault. I had planted them too far down in the earth. It never occurred to either of us that the earth itself might have been unyielding. We had dropped our seeds in our own little plot of black dirt, just as Bacola's father had dropped his seeds in his own plot of black dirt. Our innocence and faith were no more productive than his lust or despair. What is clear now is that of all of that hope, fear, lust, love, and grief. Nothing remains but Bacola and the unyielding earth. Charlie Breedlove is dead, our innocence too. The seed shriveled and died, her baby too. There is really nothing more to say except why. But since why is difficult to handle, one must take refuge in how.
Nuns go by as quiet as lust, and drunken men in sober eyes sing in the lobby of the Greek hotel. Rosemary Villanucci, our next door neighbor who lives above her father's cafe, sits in a 1939 Buick eating bread and butter. She rolls down the window to tell my sister Frida and me that we can't come in. We stare at her, wanting her bread. But more than that, wanting to poke the arrogance out of her eyes and smash the pride of ownership that curls her chewing mouth. When she comes out of the car, we will beat her up, make red marks on her white skin, and she will cry and ask us, do we want her to pull her pants down? We will say no. We don't know what we should feel or do if she does, but whenever she asks us, we know she is offering us something precious and that our own pride must be asserted by refusing to accept. School has started and Frida and I get new brown stockings and cod liver oil. Grown-ups talk in tired, edgy voices about Zick's Coal Company and take us along in the evening to the railroad tracks where we fill burlap sacks with the tiny pieces of coal lying about. Later, we walk home glancing back to see the great carloads of slag being dumped, red hot and smoking, into the raven that skirts the steel mill. The dying fire lights the sky with a dull orange glow. Frida and I lag behind, staring at the patch of color surrounded by black. It is impossible not to feel a shiver when our feet leave the gravel path and sink into the dead grass in the field. Our house is old, cold, and green. At night, a kerosene lamp lights one large room. The others are braced in darkness, peopled by roaches and mice. Adults do not talk to us. They give us directions. They issue orders without providing information. When we trip and fall down, they glance at us. If we cut or bruise ourselves, they ask us, are we crazy? When we catch colds, they shake their heads in disgust at our lack of consideration. How, they ask us, do you expect anybody to get anything done if you are all sick? We cannot answer them. Our illness is treated with contempt, foul black draught and castor oil that blunts our minds. When on a day after a trip to collect coal, I cough once loudly through bronchial tubes already packed tight with phlegm, my mother frowns. Great Jesus, get on in that bed. How many times do I have to tell you to wear something on your head? You must be the biggest fool in this town. Frida, get some rags and stuff that window. Frida restuffs the window. I trudge off the bed full of guilt and pity. I lie down in my underwear. The metal in my black garters hurts my legs, but I do not take them off, for it is too cold to lie stockingless. It takes a long time for my body to heat its place in the bed. Once I have generated a silhouette of warmth, I dare not move, for there is a cold place 1/2 inch in any direction. No one speaks to me or asks how I feel. In an hour or two, my mother comes. Her hands are large and rough, and when she rubs the Vicks salve on my chest, I am rigid with pain. She takes 2 fingers, full of it at a time, and massages my chest until I am faint. Just when I think I will tip over into a scream, she scoops out a little of the salve on her forefinger and puts it in my mouth, telling me to swallow. A hot flannel is wrapped around my neck and chest. I am covered up with heavy quilts in order to sweat, which I do promptly. Later, I throw up and my mother says, "What did you puke on the bedclothes floor? Don't you have sense enough to hold your head out the bed? Now, look what you did. You think I got time for nothing but washing up your puke?" The puke swaddles down the pillow onto the sheet, green-gray with flecks of orange. It moves like the insides of an uncooked egg, stubbornly clinging to its own mass, refusing to break up and be removed. How, I wonder, can it be so neat and nasty at the same time? My mother's voice drones on. She is not talking to me. She is talking to the puke, but she is calling it my name, Claudia. She wipes it up as best she can and puts a scratchy towel over the large, wet place. I lie down again. The rags have fallen from the window crack and the air is cold. I dare not call her back and am reluctant to leave my warmth. My mother's anger humiliates me. Her words chafe my cheeks and I am crying. I do not know that she is not angry at me, but at my sickness. I believe she despises my weakness for letting the sickness take hold. By and by, I will not get sick. I will refuse to. But for now, I am crying. I know I am making more snot, but I can't stop. My sister comes in. Her eyes are full of sorrow. She sings to me when the deep purple falls over sleepy garden walls. Someone thinks of me. I doze, thinking of plums, walls, and someone. But was it really like that? As painful as I remember? Only mildly. Or rather, it was a productive and fruitifying pain. Love, thick and dark as algala syrup, eased up into that cracked window. I could smell it, taste it, sweet, musty, with an edge of wintergreen in its base. Everywhere in that house. It stuck along with my tongue to the frosted window panes. It coated my chest along with the salve. And when the flannel came undone in my sleep, the clear, sharp curves of air outlined its presence in my throat. And in the night, when my coughing was dry and rough, feet padded into the room, hands repinned, the flannel readjusted the quilt and rested a moment on my forehead. So when I think of autumn, I think of somebody with hands who does not want me to die. It was autumn too when Mr. Henry came, our roomer. The words ballooned from the lips and hovered above our heads, silent, separate, and pleasantly mysterious. My mother was all ease and satisfaction in discussing his coming. You know him, she said to her friends, Henry Washington. He's been living over there with Miss Della Jones on 13th Street, but she's too addled now to keep up, so he's looking for another place. Oh yes, her friends do not hide their curiosity. I've been wondering how long he was going to stay up there with her. They say she's real bad off, don't know who he is half the time, and nobody else. Well, that old crazy nigga she married up with didn't help her head none. Did you hear what he told folks when he left her? What? Well, he run off with that trifling Peggy from Illyria, you know? One of the old slack Bessie's girls? That's the one. Well, somebody asked him why he left a nice, good church woman like Della for that heifer. You know, Della always did keep a good house. And he said the honest to God real reason was he couldn't take no more of that violet water Della Jones used. Said he wanted a woman to smell like a woman. Said Della was just too clean for him. Oh, dog, ain't that nasty? You telling me, what kind of reasoning is that? No kind. Some men just dogs. Is that what give her them strokes? Must have helped. But you know, none of them girls wasn't too bright. Remembering that grinning Hattie, she wasn't never right. And their auntie Julia is just still trotting up and down 16th Street talking to herself. Didn't she get put away? Nah, county wouldn't take her. Said she wasn't harming anybody. Well, she's harming me. You want something to scare the living shit out of you? You get up at 5:30 in the morning like I do and see that old hag floating by in that bonnet. Have mercy. They laugh. Frida and I are washing mason jars. We do not hear their words, but with grown-ups, we listen to watch out for their voices. Well, I hope don't nobody let me roam around like that when I get senile. It's a shame. What they gonna do about Della? Don't she have no people? A sister's coming up from North Carolina to look after her. I expect she wants to get a hold of Della's house. Oh, come on. That's an evil thought if I ever heard one. What you want to bet? Henry Washington said that sister ain't seen Della in 15 years. I kind of thought Henry would marry her one of these days. That old woman? Well, Henry ain't no chicken. No, but he ain't no buzzard either. He ever been married to anybody? No. How come? Somebody cut it off? He's just picky. He ain't picky. You see anything around here you'd marry? Well, no. He's just sensible, a steady worker with quiet ways. I hope it works out all right. It will. How much you charging? $5 every 2 weeks. That'll be a big help to you, I'll say. Their conversation is like a gently wicked dance. Sound meets sound, curtsies, shimmies, and retires. Another sound enters, but it is upstaged by still another. The two circle each other and stop. Sometimes their words move in lofty spirals. Other times they take strident leaps, and all of it is punctuated with warm, pulsed laughter, like the throb of a heart made of jelly. The edge, the curl, the thrust of their emotions is always clear to Frida and me. We do not, cannot, know the meanings of all their words, for we are 9 and 10 years old. So we watch their faces, their hands, their feet, and listen for truth in timbre. So when Mr. Henry arrived on a Saturday night, we smelled him. He smelled wonderful, like trees and lemon vanishing cream, and new now hair oil and flecks of sensen. He smiled a lot, showing small, even teeth with a friendly gap in the middle. Frida and I were not introduced to him, merely pointed out. Like, here's the bathroom. The clothes closet is here. And these are my kids, Frida and Claudia. Watch out for this window. It don't open all the way. We looked sideways at him, saying nothing and expecting him to say nothing, just to nod, as he had done at the clothes closet, acknowledging our existence. To surprise, he spoke to us. Hello there. You must be Greta Garbo, and you must be Ginger Rogers. We giggled. Even my father was startled into a smile. Want a penny? He held out a shiny coin to us. Frida lowered her head, too pleased to answer. I reached for it. He snapped his thumb and forefinger, and the penny disappeared. Our shock was laced with delight. We searched all over him, poking our fingers into his socks, looking up the inside back of his coat. If happiness is anticipation with certainty, we were happy. And while we waited for the coin to reappear, we knew we were amusing Mama and Daddy. Daddy was smiling, and Mama's eyes went soft as they followed our hands wandering over Mr. Henry's body. We loved him. Even after what came later, there was no bitterness in our memory of him. She slept in the bed with us, Frida on the outside because she is brave. It never occurs to her that if in her sleep, her head hangs over the edge of the bed, something will crawl out from under it and bite her fingers off. I sleep near the wall because that thought has occurred to me. Bicola, therefore, had to sleep in the middle. Mama had told us 2 days earlier that a case was coming, a girl who had no place to go. The county had placed her in our house for a few days until they could decide what to do, or more precisely, until the family was reunited. We were to be nice to her and not fight. Mama didn't know what got into people, but that old dog Breedlove had burned up his house and gone upside his wife's head, and everybody, as a result, was outdoors. Outdoors, we knew, was the real terror of life. The threat of being outdoors surfaced frequently in those days. Every possibility of excess was curtailed with it. If somebody ate too much, he could end up outdoors. If somebody used too much coal, he could end up outdoors. People could gamble themselves outdoors, drink themselves outdoors. Sometimes mothers put their sons outdoors. And when that happened, regardless of what the son had did, all sympathy was with him. He was outdoors, and his own flesh had done it. To be put outdoors by a landlord was one thing, unfortunate, but an aspect of life over which you had no control since you could not control your income. But to be slack enough to put oneself outdoors or heartless enough to put one's own kin outdoors, that was criminal. There's a difference between being put out and being put outdoors. If you are put out, you go somewhere else. If you are outdoors, there is no place to go. The distinction was subtle, but final. Outdoors was the end of something, an irrevocable physical fact defining and complementing our metaphysical condition. Being a minority in both caste and class, we moved about anyway on the hem of life, struggling to consolidate our weaknesses and hang on, or to creep singly up into the major folds of the garment. Our peripheral existence, however, was something we had learned to deal with, probably because it was abstract, but the concreteness of being outdoors was another matter, like the difference between the concept of death and being, in fact, dead. Dead doesn't change, and outdoors is here to stay. Knowing that there was such a thing as outdoors bred in us a hunger for property, for ownership, the firm possession of a yard, a porch, a grape arbor. Propertied Black people spent all their energies, all their love on their nests. Like frenzied, desperate birds, they overdecorated everything, fussed and fidgeted over their hard-won homes, candied, jellied, and preserved all summer to fill the cupboards and shelves. They painted, picked, and poked at every corner of their houses. And these houses loomed like hothouse sunflowers among the rows of weeds that were rented houses. Renting Black cast furtive glances at these owned yards and porches and made firmer commitments to buy themselves some nice little old place. In the meantime, they saved and scratched and piled away what they could in the rented hovels, looking forward to the day of property. Choli Breedlove, then a renting Black, having put his family outdoors, had catapulted himself beyond the reaches of human consideration. He had joined the animals, was indeed an old dog, a snake, a ratty nigger. Mrs. Breedlove was staying with the woman she worked for. The boy, Sammy, was with some other family, and Pecola was to stay with us. Choli was in jail. She came with nothing. No little paper bag with the other dress or a nightgown or 2 pair of whitish cotton bloomers. She just appeared with the white woman and sat down. We had fun in those days. Pecola was with us. Frida and I stopped fighting each other and concentrated on our guest, trying hard to keep her from feeling outdoors. When we discovered that she clearly did not want to dominate us, we liked her. She laughed when I clowned for her and smiled and accepted gracefully the food gifts my sister gave her. Would you like some graham crackers? I don't care. Frida brought her 4 graham crackers on a saucer and some milk in a blue and white Shirley Temple cup. She was a long time with the milk and gazed fondly at the silhouette of Shirley Temple's dimpled face. Frida and she had a loving conversation about how cute Shirley Temple was. I couldn't join them in their adoration because I hated Shirley. Not because she was cute, but because she danced with Bojangles, who was my friend, my uncle, my daddy, and who ought to have been soft shoeing it and chuckling with me. Instead, he was enjoying, sharing, giving a lovely dance thing with one of those little white girls whose socks never slid down under their heels. So I said, I like Jane Withers. They gave me a puzzled look, decided I was incomprehensible, and continued their reminiscing about old, squinty-eyed Shirley. Younger than both Frida and Pecola, I had not yet arrived at the turning point in the development of my psyche, which would allow me to love her. What I felt at that time was unsullied hatred. But before that, I had felt a stranger, more frightening thing than hatred for all the Shirley Temples of the world. It had begun with Christmas and the gift of dolls. The big, the special, the loving gift was always a big, blue-eyed baby doll. From the clucking sounds of adults, I knew that the doll represented what they thought was my fondest wish. I was bemused with the thing itself and the way it looked. What was I supposed to do with it? Pretend I was its mother? I had no interest in babies with the concept of motherhood. I was interested only in humans my own age and size and could not generate any enthusiasm at the prospect of being a mother. Motherhood was old age, and other remote possibilities. I learned quickly, however, what I was expected to do with the doll: rock it, fabricate storied situations around it, even sleep with it. Picture books were full of little girls sleeping with their dolls, Raggedy Ann dolls usually, but they were out of the question. I was physically revolted by and secretly frightened of those round, moronic eyes, the pancake face, and the orange worm's hair. The other dolls, which were supposed to bring me great pleasure, succeeded in doing quite the opposite. When I took to bed, its hard, unyielding limbs resisted my flesh, the tapered fingertips on those dimpled hands scratched. If, in sleep, I turned, the bone-cold head collided with my own. It was the most uncomfortable, patently aggressive sleeping companion. To hold it was no more rewarding. The starched gauze or lace on the cotton dress irritated any embrace. I had only one desire: to dismember it, to see of what it was made, to discover the dearness, to find the beauty, the desirability that had escaped me, but apparently only me. Adults, older girls, shops, magazines, newspapers, window signs, all the world had agreed that a blue-eyed, yellow-haired, pink-skinned doll was what every girl, child treasured. Here, they said, this is beautiful, and if you are on this day worthy, you may have it. I fingered the face, wondering at the single stroke eyebrows, picked at the pearly teeth stuck like two piano keys between red bowline lips, traced the turned up nose, poked the glassy blue eyeballs, twisted the yellow hair. I could not love it, but I could examine it to see what it was that all the world said was lovable. Break off the tiny fingers, bend the flat feet, loosen the hair, twist the head around, and the thing made one sound. A sound, they said, was the sweet and plaintive cry, mama, but which sounded to me like the bleat of a dying lamb, or more precisely, our icebox door opening on rusty hinges in July. Remove the cold and stupid eyeball, it would still bleat. Ah. Take off the head, shake out the sawdust, crack the back against the brass bed rail, it would bleat still. The gauze back would split, and I could see the disc with 6 holes, the secret of the sound, a mere metal roundness. Grown people frowned and fussed. You don't know how to take care of nothing. I never had a baby doll in my whole life and used to cry my eyes out for them. Now you got one beautiful one and you tear it up. What's the matter with you? How strong was their outrage? Tears threatened to erase the aloofness of their authority. The emotion of years of unfulfilled longing preened in their voices. I did not know why I destroyed those dolls, but I did know that nobody ever asked me what I wanted for Christmas. Had any adult with the power to fulfill my desires taken me seriously and asked me what I wanted, they would have known that I did not want to have anything to own or to possess any object. I wanted rather to feel something on Christmas Day. The real question would have been, dear Claudia, what experience would you like on Christmas? I could have spoken up. I want to sit on the low stool in Big Mama's kitchen with my lap full of lilacs and listen to Big Papa play his violin for me, alone. The loneliness of the stool made for my body, the security and warmth of Big Mama's kitchen, the smell of the lilacs, the sound of the music. And since it will be good to have all of my senses engaged, the taste of a peach, perhaps, afterwards. Instead, I tasted and smelled the acridness of tin plates and cups designed for tea parties that bored me. Instead, I looked with loathing on new dresses that required a hateful bath in a galvanized zinc tub before wearing. Slipping around on the zinc, no time to play or soak, for the water chilled too fast. No time to enjoy one's nakedness, only time to make curtains of soapy water careen down between the legs. Then the scratchy towels and the dreadful and humiliating absence of dirt. The irritable, unimaginative cleanliness. Gone the ink marks from legs and face, all my creations and accumulations of the day gone and replaced by goose pimples. I destroyed white baby dolls. But the dismembering of dolls was not the true horror. The truly horrifying thing was the transference of the same impulses to little white girls. The indifference with which I could have asked them was shaken only by my desire to do so, to discover what eluded me, the secret of the magic they weaved on others. What made people look at them and say, "Oh," but not for me. The eye slide of Black women as they approached them on the street, and the possessiveness, the possessive gentleness of their touch as they handled them. If I pinched them, their eyes, unlike the crazed glint of the baby doll's eyes, would fold in pain, and their cry would not be the sound of an icebox door, but a fascinating cry of pain. When I learned how repulsive this disinterested violence was, that it was repulsive because it was disinterested, my shame floundered about for refuge. The best hiding place was love. Thus, the conversion from pristine sadism to fabricated hatred to fraudulent love. It was a small step to Shirley Temple. I learned much later to worship her, just as I learned to delight in cleanliness, knowing even as I learned that the change was adjustment without improvement. 3 quarts of milk. That's what was in that icebox yesterday. 3 whole quarts. Now they ain't none, not a drop. I don't mind folks coming in and getting what they want, but 3 quarts of milk? What the devil does anybody need with 3 quarts of milk? The folks my mother was referring to was Piccola. The 3 of us, Piccola, Frida, and I, listened to her downstairs in the kitchen, fussing about the amount of milk Piccola had drunk. We knew she was fond of the Shirley Temple cup and took every opportunity to drink milk out of it just to handle and see sweet Shirley's face. My mother knew that Frida and I hated milk and assumed Piccola drank it out of greediness. It was certainly not for us to dispute her. We didn't initiate talk with grown-ups. We answered their questions. Ashamed of the insults that were being heaped on our friend, we just sat there. I picked toe jam, Frida cleaned her fingernails with her teeth, and Piccola finger traced some scars on her knees, her head cocked to one side. My mother's fussing soliloquies always irritated and depressed us. They were interminable, insulting, and although indirect, Mama never named anybody, just talked about folks and some people. Extremely painful in their thrust. She would go on like that for hours, connecting one offense to another until all of the things that chagrined her were spewed out. Then, having told everybody and everything off, she would burst into song and sing the rest of the day. But it was such a long time before the singing part came. In the meantime, our stomachs jellying and our necks burning, we listened, avoiding each other's eyes and picked toe jam or whatever. I don't know what I'm supposed to be running here at Charity Ward, I guess. Time for me to get out of the giving line and get into the getting line. I guess I ain't supposed to have nothing. I'm supposed to end up in the poorhouse. Look like nothing I do is going to keep me out of there. Folks just spend all their time trying to figure out ways to send me to the poorhouse. I got about as much business with another mouth to feed as a cat has with side pockets. As if I don't have trouble enough trying to feed my own and keep out the poorhouse. Now I got something else in here that's just going to drink me on in there. Well, no, she ain't. Not as long as I got strength in my body and a tongue in my head. There's a limit to everything. I ain't got nothing to just throw away. Don't nobody need 3 quarts of milk. Henry Ford don't need 3 quarts of milk. That's just downright sinful. I'm willing to do what I can for folks. Can't nobody say I ain't. But this has got to stop, and I'm just the one to stop it. Bible say, watch as well as pray. Folks just dump their children off on you and go on about their business. Ain't nobody even peeped in here to see whether that child has a loaf of bread. Look like they would just peep in to see whether I had a loaf of bread to give her. But no, that thought don't cross their mind. They old, trifling. Charlie been out of jail 2 whole days and ain't been here yet to see if his own child was live or dead. She could be dead for all he know. And that mama, neither. What kind of something is that? When mama got around to Henry Ford and all those people who didn't care whether she had a loaf of bread, it was time to go. We wanted to miss the part about Roosevelt and the CCC camps. Frida got up and started down the stairs. Piccola and I followed, making a wide arc to avoid the kitchen doorway. We sat on the steps of the porch where my mother's words could reach us only in spurts. It was a lonesome Saturday. The house smelled of Fells, naphtha, and the sharp odor of mustard greens cooking. Saturdays were lonesome, fussy, soapy days. Second in misery only to those tight, starchy, cough drop Sundays so full of don'ts and set yourself downs. If my mother was in a singing mood, it wasn't so bad. She would sing about hard times, bad times, and somebody done gone and left me times. But her voice was so sweet and her singing eyes so melty, I found myself longing for those hard times, yearning to be grown without a thin dime to my name. I looked forward to the delicious time when my man would leave me, when I would hate to see that evening sun go down, because then I would know my man has left this town. Misery, colored by the greens and blues in my mother's voice, took all of the grief out of the words and left me with the conviction that pain was not only endurable, it was sweet. But without song, those Saturdays sat on my head like a coal scuttle, and if mama was fussing, as she was now, it was like somebody throwing stones at it. And here I am, poor as a bowl of yak meat. What do they think I am? Some kind of Santa Claus? Well, they can just take their stocking down because it ain't Christmas. We fidgeted. Let's do something, Frida said. What do you want to do? I asked. I don't know. Nothing. Frida stared at the tops of the trees. Piccola looked at her feet. You want to go up to Mr. Henry's room and look at his girly magazines? Frida made an ugly face. She didn't like to look at dirty pictures. Well, I continued, we could look at his Bible. That's pretty. Frida sucked her teeth and made a piffed sound with her lips. Okay, then. We could go thread needles for the half-blind lady. She'll give us a penny. Frida snorted. Her eyes look like snot. I don't feel like looking at them. What do you want to do, Piccola? I don't care, she said. Anything you want. I had another idea. We could go up to the alley and see what's in the trash cans. Too cold, said Frida. She was bored and irritable. I know. We could make some fudge. You kidding me? With mama in there fussing? When she starts fussing at the walls, you know she's going to be at it all day. She wouldn't even let us. Well, let's go over to the Greek Hotel and listen to them cuss. Oh, who wants to do that? Besides, they say the same old words all the time. My supplies of ideas exhausted. I began to concentrate on the white spots on my fingernails. The total signified the number of boyfriends I would have. 7. Mama's soliloquy slid into the silence. Bible say feed the hungry. That's fine. That's all right. But I ain't feeding no elephants. Anybody need 3 quarts of milk to live need to get out of here. They in the wrong place. What is this? Some kind of dairy farm? Suddenly, Piccola bolted straight up, her eyes wide with terror. A whining sound came from her mouth. What's the matter with you? Frida stood up too. Then we both looked where Piccola was staring. Blood was running down her legs. Some drops were on the steps. I leaped up. Hey, you cut yourself? Look, it's all over your dress. A brownish red stain discolored the back of her dress. She kept whining, standing with her legs far apart. Frida said, oh, Lordy, I know what this is. What? Piccola's finger went to her mouth. That's menstruating. What's that? You know. Am I going to die? She asked. No, you won't die. It just means you can have a baby. What? How do you know? I was sick and tired of Frida knowing everything. Mildred told me and Mama too. I don't believe it. You don't have to, dummy. Look, wait here. Sit down, Picola, right here. Frida was all authority and zest. And you, she said to me, you go get some water. Water? Yes, stupid. Water. And be quiet, or Mama will hear you. Picola sat down again, a little less fear in her eyes. I went into the kitchen. What do you want, girl? Mama was rinsing curtains in the sink. Some water, ma'am. Right where I'm working, naturally. Well, get a glass. No, not a clean one either. Use that jar. I got a mason jar and filled it with water from the faucet. It seemed a long time filling. Don't nobody never want nothing till they see me at the sink. Then everybody got to drink water. When the jar was full, I moved to leave the room. Where you going? Outside. Drink that water right here. I ain't gonna break nothing. You don't know what you're gonna do. Yes, ma'am, I do. Let me take it out. I won't spill none. You bet not. I got to the porch and stood there with the mason jar of water. Picola was crying. What are you crying for? Does it hurt? She shook her head. Then stop slinging snot. Frida opened the back door. She had something tucked in her blouse. She looked at me in amazement and pointed to the jar. What's that supposed to do? You told me. You said get some water. Not a little old jar full, lots of water to scrub the steps with, dumbbell. How was I supposed to know? Yeah, how was you? Come on. She pulled Picola up by the arm. Let's go back here. They headed for the side of the house where the bushes were thick. Hey, what about me? I want to go. Shut up, Frida stage whispered. Mama will hear you. You watch the steps. They disappeared around the corner of the house. I was going to miss something again. Here was something important, and I had to stay behind and not see any of it. I poured the water on the steps, sloshed it with my shoe, and ran to join them. Frida was on her knees. A white rectangle of cotton was near her on the ground. She was pulling Picola's pants off. Come on, step out of them. She managed to get the soiled pants down and flung them to me. Here. What am I supposed to do with these? Bury them, moron. Frida told Picola to hold the cotton between her legs. How's she going to walk like that? I asked. Frida didn't answer. Instead, she took 2 safety pins from the hem of her skirt and began to pin the ends of the napkin to Picola's dress. I picked up the pants with 2 fingers and looked about for something to dig a hole with. A rustling noise in the bushes startled me, and turning toward it, I saw a pair of fascinated eyes and a doe-white face. Rosemary was watching us. I grabbed for her face and succeeded in scratching her nose. She screamed and jumped back. Mrs. McTeer! Mrs. McTeer! Rosemary hollered. Frida and Claudia are out here playing nasty. Mrs. McTeer! Mama opened the window and looked down at us. What? They're playing nasty? Mrs. McTeer, look, and Claudia hit me because I seen them. Mama slammed the window shut and came running out the back door. What you all doing? Oh, playing nasty, huh? She reached into the bushes and pulled off a switch. I'd rather raise pigs than some nasty girls. At least I can slaughter them. We began to shriek. No, mama, no, ma'am. We wasn't. She's a liar. No, ma'am. Mama, no, ma'am. Mama. Mama grabbed Frida by the shoulder, turned her around and gave her 3 or 4 stinging cuts on her legs. Gonna be nasty, huh? Now you ain't. Frida was destroyed. Whippings wounded and insulted her. Mama looked at Picola. You too, she said. Child of mine or not. She grabbed Picola and spun her around. The safety pin snapped open on one of the napkin and Mama saw it fall from under her dress. The switch hovered in the air while Mama blinked. What the devil is going on here? Frida was sobbing. I, next in line, began to explain. She was bleeding. We was trying to stop the blood. Mama looked at Frida for verification. Frida nodded. She's menstruating. We was just helping. Mama released Picola and stood looking at her. Then she pulled both of them toward her, their heads against her stomach. Her eyes were sorry. All right. Now stop crying. I didn't know. Come on now. Get on in the house. Go on home, Rosemary. The show is over. We trooped in, Frida sobbing quietly, Piccola carrying a white tail, me carrying the little girl gone to woman pants. Mama led us to the bathroom. She prodded Piccola inside and taking the underwear from me told us to stay out. We could hear water running into the bathtub. You think she's going to drown her? Oh, Claudia, you're so dumb. She's just going to wash her clothes and all. Should we beat up Rosemary? No, leave her alone. The water gushed, and over its gushing, we could hear the music of my mother's laughter. That night in bed, the three of us lay still. We were full of awe and respect for Piccola. Lying next to a real person who was really menstruating was somehow sacred. She was different from us now, grown up like. She herself felt the distance, but refused to lord it over us. After a long while, she spoke very softly. Is it true that I can have a baby now? Sure, said Frida drowsily. Sure you can. But how? Her voice was hollow with wonder. Oh, said Frida, somebody has to love you. Oh. There was a long pause in which Piccola and I thought this over. It would involve, I supposed, my man, who before leaving me would love me. Maybe that's why the women were sad the men left before they could make a baby. Then Piccola asked a question that had never entered my mind. How do you do that? I mean, how do you get somebody to love you? But Frida was asleep, and I didn't know.
There is an abandoned store on the southeast corner of Broadway and 35th Street in Lorain, Ohio. It does not recede into its background of leaden sky, nor harmonize with the gray frame houses and black telephone poles around it. Rather, it foids itself on the eye of the passerby in a manner that is both irritating and melancholy. Visitors who drive to this tiny town wonder why it had not been torn down, while pedestrians who are residents of the neighborhood simply look away when they pass it. At one time, when the building housed a pizza parlor, people saw only slow-footed teenage boys huddled around the corner. These boys met there to fill their groins, smoked cigarettes, and planned mild outrages. The smoke from their cigarettes they inhaled deeply, forcing it to fill their lungs, their hearts, their thighs, and keep at bay the shiveriness, the energy of their youth. They moved slowly, laughed slowly, but flicked the ashes from their cigarettes too quickly, too often, and exposed themselves to those who were interested as novices to the habit. But long before the sound of their lowing and the sight of their preening, the building was leased to a Hungarian baker, modestly famous for his brioche and poppy seed rolls. Earlier than that, there was a real estate office there, and even before that, some gypsies used it as a base of operations. The gypsy families gave the large plate glass windows as much distinction and character as it ever had. The girls of the family took turns sitting between yards of velvet draperies and oriental rugs hanging at the windows. They looked out and occasionally smiled or winked or beckoned, only occasionally. Mostly they looked, their elaborate dresses, long-sleeved and long-skirted, hiding the nakedness that stood in their eyes. So fluid has the population in that area been that probably no one remembers longer ago, before the time of the gypsies and the time of the teenagers, when the breedloves lived there, nestled together in the storefront. Festering together in the debris of a realtor's whim, they slipped in and out of the box of peeling gray, making no stir in the neighborhood, no sound in the labor force, and no wave in the mayor's office. Each member of the family in his own cell of consciousness, each making his own patchwork quilt of reality, collecting fragments of experience here, pieces of information there. From the tiny impressions gleaned from one another, they created a sense of belonging and tried to make do with the way they found each other. The plan of the living quarters was as unimaginative as a first-generation Greek landlord could contrive it to be. The large store area was partitioned into 2 rooms by beaver board planks that did not reach to the ceiling. There was a living room, which the family called the front room, and the bedroom where all the living was done. In the front room were 2 sofas, an upright piano, and a tiny artificial Christmas tree, which had been there decorated and dust-laden for 2 years. The bedroom had 3 beds, a narrow iron bed for Sammy, 14 years old, another for Pecola, 11 years old, and a double bed for Charlie and Mrs. Breedlove. In the center of the bedroom, for the even distribution of heat, stood a coal stove. Trunks, chairs, a small end table, and a cardboard wardrobe closet were placed around the walls. The kitchen was in the back of this apartment, a separate room. There were no bath facilities, only a toilet bowl, and accessible to the eye, if not to the ear, of the tenants. There's nothing more to say about the furnishings. They were anything but describable, having been conceived, manufactured, shipped, and sold in various states of thoughtlessness, greed, and indifference. The furniture had aged without ever having become familiar. People had owned it, but never known it. No one had lost a penny or a brooch under the cushions of either sofa and remembered the place and time of the loss or the finding. No one had clocked and said, "But I had it just a minute ago. I was sitting right here talking to..." Or, "Here it is. It must have slipped down while I was feeding the baby." No one had given birth in one of the beds or remembered with fondness the peeled, pinked places, because that's what the baby, when he learned to pull himself up or used to pick loose. No thrifty child had tucked a wad of gum under the table. No happy drunk, a friend of the family with a fat neck, unmarried, but God, how he eats, had sat at the piano and played "You Are My Sunshine." No young girl had stared at the tiny Christmas tree and remembered when she had decorated it, or wondered if that blue ball was going to hold, or if he would ever come back to see it. There were no memories among those pieces, certainly no memories to be cherished. Occasionally, an item provoked a physical reaction, an increase of acid irritation in the upper intestinal tract, a light flush of perspiration at the back of the neck as circumstances surrounding the piece of furniture were recalled. The sofa, for example, it had been purchased new, but the fabric had split straight across the back by the time it was delivered. The store would not take the responsibility. "Look at here, buddy. It was okay when I put it on the truck. The store can't do anything about it once it's on the truck." Listerine and Lucky Strike breath. "But I don't want no tore couch. If it's bought new." Pleading eyes and tightened testicles. "Tough shit, buddy. your tough shit. You could hate a sofa, of course, that is, if you could hate a sofa, but it didn't matter. You still had to get together $4.80 a month. If you had to pay $4.80 a month for a sofa that started off split, no good, and humiliating, you couldn't take any joy owning it. And the joylessness stank, pervading everything. The stink of it kept you from painting the beaver board walls, from getting a matching piece of material for the chair, even from sewing up the split, which became a gash, which became a gaping chasm that exposed the cheap frame and cheaper upholstery. It withheld the refreshment and a sleep slept on it. It imposed a furtiveness on the loving done on it, like a sore tooth that is not content to throb in isolation, but must diffuse its own pain to other parts of the body, making breathing difficult, vision limited, nerves unsettled. So a hated piece of furniture produces a fretful malaise that asserts itself throughout the house and limits the delights of things not related to it. The only living thing in the Breedlove's house was the coal stove, which lived independently of everything and everyone, its fire being out and banked or up at its own discretion, in spite of the fact that the family fed it and knew all the details of its regiment. Sprinkle, do not dump, not too much. The fire seemed to live, go down, or die according to its own schemata. In the morning, however, it always saw fit to die. The Breedloves did not live in a storefront because they were having temporary difficulty adjusting to the cutbacks at the plant. They lived there because they were poor and black, and they stayed there because they believed they were ugly. Although their poverty was traditional and stultifying, it was not unique. But their ugliness was unique. No one could have convinced them that they were not relentlessly and aggressively ugly, except for the father, Charlie, whose ugliness, the result of despair, dissipation, and violence directed toward petty things and weak people, was behavior. The rest of the family, Mrs. Breedlove, Sammy Breedlove, and Pecola Breedlove, wore their ugliness, put it on, so to speak, although it did not belong to them. The eyes, the small eyes set closely together under narrow foreheads, the low, irregular hairlines, which seemed even more irregular in contrast to the straight, heavy eyebrows which nearly met. Keen but crooked noses with insolent nostrils. They had high cheekbones and their ears turned forward. Shapely lips which called attention not to themselves but to the rest of the face. You looked at them and wondered why they were so ugly. You looked closely and could not find the source. Then you realized that it came from conviction, their conviction. It was as though some mysterious, all-knowing master had given each one a cloak of ugliness to wear, and they had each accepted it without question. They had looked about themselves and saw nothing to contradict the statement, saw in fact support for it, leaning at them from every billboard, every movie, every glance. Yes, they had said, you are right. And they took the ugliness in their hands, threw it as a mantle over them, and went about the world with it, dealing with it each according to his way. Mrs. Breedlove handled hers as an actor does a prop, for the articulation of character, for support of a role she frequently imagined was hers, martyrdom. Sammy used it as a weapon to cause others pain. He adjusted his behavior to it, chose his companions on the basis of it, people who could be fascinated, even intimidated by it. And Pecola, she hid behind hers, concealed, veiled, eclipsed, peeping out from behind the shroud very seldom, and then only to yearn for the return of the mask. This family on a Saturday morning in October began one by one to stir out of their dreams of affluence and vengeance into the anonymous misery of their storefront. Mrs. Breedlove slipped noiselessly out of bed, put a sweater on over her nightgown, which was an old day dress, and walked toward the kitchen. Her one good foot made hard, bony sounds. The twisted one whispered on the linoleum. In the kitchen, she made noises with doors, faucets, and pans. The noises were hollow, but the threats they implied were not. Pecola opened her eyes and lay staring at the dead coal stove. Charlie mumbled, thrashed about in the bed for a minute, and then was quiet. Even from where Pecola lay, she could smell Charlie's whiskey. The noises in the kitchen became louder and less hollow. There was direction and purpose in Mrs. Breedlove's movements that had nothing to do with the preparation of breakfast. This awareness, supported by ample evidence from the past, made Pecola tighten her stomach muscles and ration her breath. Charlie had come home drunk. Unfortunately, he had been too drunk to quarrel, so the whole business would have to erupt this morning. Because it had not taken place immediately, the oncoming fight would lack spontaneity. It would be calculated, uninspired, and deadly. Mrs. Breedlove came swiftly into the room and stood at the foot of the bed where Charlie lay. I need some coal in this house. Charlie did not move. Hear me? Mrs. Breedlove jabbed Charlie's foot. Charlie opened his eyes slowly. They were red and menacing. With no exception, Charlie had the meanest eyes in town. Oh, woman! I said I need some coal. It's as cold as a witch tit in this house. Your whiskey ass wouldn't feel hellfire, but I'm cold. I gotta do a lot of things, but I ain't gotta freeze. Leave me alone. Not until you get me some coal. If working like a mule don't give me the right to be warm, what am I doing it for? You sure ain't bringing in nothing. If it was left up to you, we'd all be dead. Her voice was like an earache in the brain. If you think I'm going to wait out in the cold and get it myself, you'd better think again. I don't give a shit how you get it. A bubble of violence burst into his throat. You're going to get your drunk self out of that bed and get me some coal or not? Silence. Charlie? Silence. Don't try me this morning, man. You say one more word and I'll split you open. Silence. All right, but if I sneeze once, just once, God help your butt. Sammy was awake now too, but pretending to be asleep. Pecola still held her stomach muscles taut and conserved her breath. They all knew that Mrs. Breedlove could have, would have, and had gotten coal from the shed, or that Sammy or Pecola could be directed to get it. But the unquarreled evening hung like the first note of a dirge and sullenly expectant air. An escapade of drunkenness, no matter how routine, had its own ceremonial close. The tiny, indistinguished days that Mrs. Breedlove lived were identified, grouped, and classed by these quarrels. They gave substance to the minutes and hours otherwise dim and unrecalled. They relieved the tiresomeness of poverty, gave grandeur to the dead rooms. And these violent breaks in routine that were themselves routine, she could display the style and imagination of what she believed to be her own true self. To deprive her of these fights was to deprive her of all the zest and reasonableness of life. Charlie, by his habitual drunkenness and horniness, provided them both with the material they needed to make their lives tolerable. Mrs. Breedlove considered herself an upright and Christian woman, burdened with a no-count man with whom God wanted her to punish. Charlie was beyond redemption, of course, and redemption was hardly the point. Mrs. Breedlove was not interested in Christ the Redeemer, but rather Christ the Judge. Often she could be heard discoursing with Jesus about Charlie, pleading with him to help her strike the bastard down from his pinochle of pride. And once, when a drunken gesture caterpillared Charlie into the red-hot stove, she screamed, "Get him, Jesus! Get him!" If Charlie had stopped drinking, she would never have forgiven Jesus. She needed Charlie's sins desperately. The lower he sank, the wilder and more irresponsible he became, the more splendid she and her task became. In the name of Jesus. No less did Charlie need her. She was one of the few things abhorrent to him that he could touch and therefore hurt. He poured out on her the sum of all his inarticulate fury and aborted desires. Hating her, he could leave himself intact. When he was still very young, Charlie had been surprised in some bushes by two white men while he was newly but earnestly engaged in eliciting sexual pleasure from a little country girl. The man had shown a flashlight right on his behind. He had stopped, terrified. They chuckled. The beam of the flashlight did not move. "Go on," they said. "Go on and finish. And nigger, make it good." The flashlight did not move. For some reason, Charlie had not hated the white man. He hated, despised the girl. Even a half-remembrance of this episode, along with myriad other humiliations, defeats, and emasculations, could stir him into flights of depravity that surprised himself, but only himself. Somehow he could not astound. He could only be astounded. So he gave that up too. Charlie and Mrs. Breedlove fought each other with a darkly brutal formalism that was paralleled only by their lovemaking. Tacitly, they had agreed not to kill each other. He fought her the way a coward fights a man, with feet the palm of his hands and teeth. She, in turn, fought back in a purely feminine way, with frying pans and pokers, and occasionally a flat iron would sail toward his head. They did not talk, groan, or curse during these beatings. There was only the muted sound of falling things and flesh on unsurprised flesh. There was a difference in the reaction of the children to these battles. Sammy cursed for a while, or left the house, or threw himself into the fray. He was known by the time he was 14 to have run away from home no less than 27 times. Once he got to Buffalo and stayed 3 months. His returns, whether by force or circumstance, were sullen. Pacola, on the other hand, restricted by youth and sex, experimented with methods of endurance. Though the methods varied, the pain was as consistent as it was deep. She struggled between an overwhelming desire that no one would kill the other and a profound wish that she herself could die. Now she was whispering, "Don't, Mrs. Breedlove, don't." Pacola, like Sammy and Charlie, always called her mother Mrs. Breedlove. "Don't, Mrs. Breedlove, don't." But Mrs. Breedlove did. By the grace, no doubt, of God, Mrs. Breedlove sneezed just once. She ran into the bedroom with a dishpan full of cold water and threw it in Charlie's face. He sat up, choking and spitting. Naked and ashen, he leaped from the bed and with a flying tackle grabbed his wife around the waist and they hit the floor. Charlie picked her up and knocked her down with the back of his hand. She fell in a sitting position, her back supported by Sammy's bed frame. She had not let go of the dishpan and began to hit at Charlie's thighs and groin with it. He put his foot on her chest and she dropped the pan. Dropping to his knee, he struck her several times in the face, and she might have succumbed early had he not hit his hand against the metal bed frame when his wife ducked. Mrs. Breedlove took advantage of this momentary suspension of blows and slipped out of his reach. Sammy, who had watched in silence their struggling at his bedside, suddenly began to hit his father about the head with both fists, shouting, "You naked fuck!" over and over and over. Mrs. Breedlove, having snatched up the round, flat stove lid, ran tippy-toe to Charlie as he was pushing himself up from his knees and struck him 2 blows, knocking him right back into the senselessness out of which she had provoked him. Panting, she threw a quilt over him and let him lie. Sammy screamed, "Kill him! Kill him!" Mrs. Breedlove looked at Sammy with surprise. "Cut out that noise, boy." She put the stove lid back in place and walked toward the kitchen. At the doorway, she paused long enough to say to her son, "Get up from there anyhow. I need some coal." Letting herself breathe easy now, Pacola covered her head with the quilt. The sick feeling, which she had tried to prevent by holding in her stomach, came quickly in spite of her precaution. There surged in her the desire to heave, but as always, she knew she could not. "Please, God," she whispered into the palm of her hand, "please make me disappear." She squeezed her eyes shut. Little parts of her body faded away, now slowly, now with a hush. Slowly again, her fingers went one by one. Then her arms disappeared all the way to the elbow. Her feet now. Yes, that was good. The legs all at once. It was hardest above the thighs. She had to be real still and pull. Her stomach would not go. But finally, it too went away. Then her chest, her neck, the face was hard too. Almost done, almost. Only her tight, tight eyes were left. They were always left. Try as she might, she could never get her eyes to disappear. So, what was the point? They were everything. Everything was there in them. All of those pictures, all of those faces. She had long ago given up the idea of running away to see new pictures, new faces, as Sammy had so often done. He never took her, and he never thought about his going ahead of time, so it was never planned. It wouldn't have worked anyway. As long as she looked the way she did, as long as she was ugly, she would have to stay with these people. Somehow, she belonged to them. Long hours she sat looking in the mirror, trying to discover the secret of the ugliness that made her ignored or despised at school by teachers and classmates alike. She was the only member of her class who sat alone at a double desk. The first letter of her last name forced her to sit in the front of the room always. But what about Marie Apollinaire? Marie was in front of her, but she shared a desk with Luc Angelino. Her teachers had always treated her this way. They tried never to glance at her and called on her only when everyone was required to respond. She also knew that when one of the girls at school wanted to be particularly insulting to a boy or wanted to get an immediate response from him, she could say, "Bobby loves Piccola Breedlove, Bobby loves Piccola Breedlove," and never fail to get peals of laughter from those in earshot and mock anger from the accused. It had occurred to Piccola some time ago that if her eyes, those eyes that held the pictures and knew the sights, if those eyes of hers were different, that is to say, beautiful, she herself would be different. Her teeth were good, and at least her nose was not big and flat like some of those who were thought so cute. If she looked different, beautiful, maybe Charlie would be different, and Mrs. Breedlove too. Maybe they'd say, "Why, look at pretty-eyed Piccola. We mustn't do bad things in front of those pretty eyes. Pretty eyes, pretty blue eyes, big, blue, pretty eyes. Run, Jip, run. Jip runs, Alice runs. Alice has blue eyes. Jerry has blue eyes. Jerry runs, Alice runs. They run with their blue eyes. Four pretty blue eyes. Blue sky eyes, blue like Mrs. Forrest. Blue blouse eyes, morning glory blue eyes. Alice and Jerry, blue storybook eyes." Each night without fail she prayed for blue eyes. Fervently for a year she had prayed. Although somewhat discouraged, she was not without hope. To have something as wonderful as that happen would take a long, long time. Thrown in this way into the binding conviction that only a miracle could relieve her, she would never know her beauty. She would see only what there was to see, the eyes of other people. She walks down Garden Avenue to a small grocery store which sells penny candy. 3 pennies are in her shoe, slipping back and forth between the sock and the inner sole. With each step, she feels the painful press of the coins against her foot, a sweet and durable, even cherished irritation full of promise and delicate security. There's plenty of time to consider what to buy. Now, however, she moves down an avenue gently buffeted by the familiar and therefore loved images. The dandelions at the base of the telephone pole. Why, she wonders, do people call them weeds? She thought they were pretty, but grown-ups say, Miss Dunyan keeps her yard so nice, not a dandelion anywhere. Hunky women and black babushkas go into the fields with baskets to pull them up, but they do not want the yellow heads, only the jagged leaves. They make dandelion soup, dandelion wine. Nobody loves the head of a dandelion, maybe because there are so many, strong and soon. There was a sidewalk crack shaped like a Y, and the other one that lifted the concrete up from the dirt floor. Frequently, her slouching step had made her trip over that stone. Skates would go well over the sidewalk. Old it was and smooth, it made the wheels glide evenly with a mild whir. The newly paved walks were bumpy and uncomfortable, and the sound of skate wheels on new walks was grating. There and other inanimate things she saw and experienced. They were real to her. She knew them. They were the codes and touchstones of the world, capable of translation and possession. She owned the crack that made her stumble. She owned the clumps of dandelions whose white heads last fall she had blown away, whose yellow heads this fall she peered into. And owning them made her part of the world, and the world a part of her. She climbs 4 wooden steps to the door of Jakubowski's Fresh Veg, Meat and Sundry Store. A bell tinkles as she opens it. Standing before the counter, she looks at the array of candies. All Mary Janes, she decides, 3 for a penny. The resistant sweetness that breaks open at last to deliver peanut butter, the oil and salt which complement the sweet pull of caramel. A peal of anticipation unsettles her stomach. She pulls off her shoe and takes out the 3 pennies. The gray head of Mr. Jakubowski looms up over the counter. He urges his eyes out of his thoughts to encounter her. Blue eyes, blear dropped, slowly like Indian summer, moving imperceptibly toward fall. He looks toward her, somewhere between retina and object, between vision and view. His eyes draw back, hesitate, and hover. At some fixed point in time and space, he senses that he need not waste the effort of a glance. He does not see her because for him there is nothing to see. How can a 52-year-old white immigrant storekeeper with the taste of potatoes and beer in his mouth his mind honed on the doe-eyed Virgin Mary, his sensibilities blunted by a permanent awareness of loss. See, a little black girl. Nothing in his life even suggested that the feat was possible, not to say desirable or necessary. Yeah? She looks up at him and sees the vacuum where curiosity ought to lodge, and something more, the total absence of human recognition, the glazed separateness. She does not know what keeps his glance suspended, perhaps because he is grown, or a man, and she a little girl. But she has seen interest, disgust, even anger in grown male eyes. Yet this vacuum is not new to her. It has an edge. Somewhere in the bottom lid is the distaste. She has seen it lurking in the eyes of all white people. So, the distaste must be for her blackness. All things in her are flux and anticipation, but her blackness is static and dread. And it is the blackness that accounts for, that creates the vacuum edged with distaste in white eyes. She points her finger at the Mary Janes, a little black shaft of finger, its tip pressed on the display window. The quietly inoffensive assertion of a black child's attempt to communicate with a white adult. Them. The word is more sigh than sense. What? These? Phlegm and impatience mingle in his voice. She shakes her head, her fingertip fixed on the spot, which in her view, at any rate, identifies the Mary Janes. He cannot see her view, the angle of his vision, the slant of her finger makes it incomprehensible to him. His lumpy red hand plops around in the glass casing like the agitated head of a chicken outraged by the loss of its body. Christ, can't you talk? Her fingers brush the Mary Janes. She nods. Well, why don't you say so? One? How many? Pacola unfolds her fist, showing the 3 pennies. He scoots 3 Mary Janes toward her, 3 yellow rectangles in each pocket. She holds the money toward him. He hesitates, not wanting to touch her hand. She does not know how to move the finger of her right hand from the display counter or how to get the coins out of her left hand. Finally, he reaches over and takes the pennies from her hand. His nails graze her damp palm. Outside, Pacola feels the inexplicable shame ebb. Dandelions. A dart of affection leaps out from her to them, but they do not look at her and do not send love back. She thinks, they are ugly. They are weeds. Preoccupied with that revelation, she trips on the sidewalk crack. Anger stirs and wakes in her. It opens its mouth and, like a hot-mouthed puppy, laps up the dredges of her shame. Anger is better. There's a sense of being in anger, a reality, and presence, an awareness of worth. It is a lovely surging. Her thoughts fall back to Mr. Jakubowski's eyes, his phlegmy voice. The anger will not hold. The puppy is too easily surfeited, its thirst too quickly quenched. It sleeps. The shame wells up again, its muddy rivulet seeping into her eyes. What to do before the tears come? She remembers the Mary Janes. Each pale yellow wrapper has a picture on it, a picture of little Mary Jane for whom the candy is named. Smiling white face, blonde hair and gentle disarray, blue eyes looking at her out of a world of clean comfort. The eyes are petulant, mischievous. To Pecola, they are simply pretty. She eats the candy and its sweetness is good. To eat the candy is somehow to eat the eyes, eat Mary Jane, love Mary Jane, be Mary Jane. 3 pennies had bought her 9 lovely orgasms with Mary Jane. Lovely Mary Jane, for whom a candy is named. 3 whores lived in the apartment above the Breedlove's storefront. China, Poland, and Miss Marie. Pecola loved them, visited them, and ran their errands. They, in turn, did not despise her. On an October morning, the morning of the Stovelid triumph, Pecola climbed the stairs to their apartment. Even before the door was open to her tapping, she could hear Poland singing, her voice sweet and hard like new strawberries. I got blues in my meal barrel, blues up on the shelf. I got blues in my meal barrel, blues up on the shelf, blues in my bedroom 'cause I'm sleeping by myself. Hi, Dumpling, where your socks? Marie seldom called Pecola the same thing twice, but invariably her epithets were fun ones, chosen from menus and dishes that were forever uppermost in her mind. Hello, Miss Marie. Hello, Miss China. Hello, Miss Poland. You heard me wear your socks. You as bare-legged as a yard dog. I couldn't find any. Couldn't find any? Must be something in your house that loves socks. China chuckled. Whenever something was missing, Marie attributed its disappearance to something in the house that loved it. There's something in this house that loves brush's ears, she would say with alarm. Poland and China were getting ready for the evening. Poland forever ironing, forever singing. China sitting on a pale green kitchen chair, forever and forever curling her hair. Marie never got ready. The women were friendly, but slow to begin talk. Pecola always took the initiative with Marie, who once inspired, was difficult to stop. How come you got so many boyfriends, Miss Marie? Boyfriends? Titla and I ain't seen a boy since 1927. You didn't see none then. China stuck the hot curlers into a tin of New Nile hairdressing. The oil hissed at the touch of the hot metal. How come, Miss Marie? Pecola insisted. How come what? How come I ain't seen a boy since 1927? Because there ain't been no boy since then. That's when they stopped. Folks started getting born old. You mean that's when you got old, China said. I ain't never got old, just fat. Same thing. You think because you're skinny, folks think you young? You're made a hint by a girdle. And you look like the north side of a southbound mule. All I know is them bandy little legs of yours is every bit as old as mine. Don't worry about my bandy legs. That's the first thing they push aside. All three of the women laughed. Marie threw back her head. From deep inside, her laughter came like the sound of many rivers, freely, deeply, muddily, heading for the room of an open sea. China giggled spastically. Each gasp seemed to be yanked out of her by an unseen hand jerking an unseen string. Poland, who seldom spoke unless she was drunk, laughed without sound. When she was sober, she hummed mostly or chanted blues songs of which she knew many. Piccola fingered the fringe of a scarf that lay on the back of a sofa. I never seen nobody with as many boyfriends as you got, Miss Marie. How come they all love you? Marie opened a bottle of root beer. What else they gonna do? They know I'm rich and good looking. They wants to put their toes in my curly hair and get at my money. You rich, Miss Marie? Puddin', I got money's mammy. Where you get it from? You don't do no work. Yeah, said China. Where you get it from? Hoover gave it to me. I did him a favor once for the FBI. What'd you do? I did him a favor. They wanted to catch this crook you see, name of Johnny. He was as low down as they come. We know that. China arranged a curl. The FBI wanted him bad. He killed more people than TB. And if you crossed him, oh, Jesus, he'd run you as long as there was ground. Well, I was little and cute then. No more than 90 pounds soaking wet. You ain't never been soaking wet, China said. Well, you ain't never been dry. Shut up. Let me tell you, Swinton. To tell it true, I was the only one who could handle him. He'd go out and rob a bank and kill some people, and I'd say to him soft like, Johnny, you shouldn't do that. And he'd say he just had to bring me pretty things, lacy drawers and all. And every Saturday we'd get a case of beer and fry up some fish. We'd fry it in meal and egg batter, and when it was all brown and crisp, not hard though, we'd break open that cold beer. Marie's eyes went soft as the memory of just such a meal, sometime, somewhere, transfixed her. All her stories were subject to breaking down at descriptions of food. Piccola saw Marie's teeth settling down into the back of crisp sea bass, saw the fat fingers putting back into her mouth tiny flakes of white hot meat that had escaped from her lips. She heard the pop of the beer bottle cap, smelled the acridness of the first stream of vapor, felt the cold beeriness hit the tongue. She ended the daydream long before Marie. But what about the money? She asked. China hooted. She's making like she's a lady in red that told on Dillinger. Dillinger wouldn't have come near you, lest he was going hunting in Africa and shoot you for a hippo. Well, this hippo had a ball back in Chicago. Whoa, Jesus, 99. How come you always say, whoa, Jesus, in a number? Pecola had long wanted to know. Because my mama taught me never to cuss. Did she teach you not to drop your drawers? China asked. Didn't have none, said Marie. Never saw a pair of drawers till I was 15 when I left Jackson and was doing day work in Cincinnati. My white lady gave me some old ones of hers. I thought they was some kind of stocking cap I put on my head when I dusted. When she saw me, she liked to fell out. You must have been one dumb somebody. China lit a cigarette and cooled her irons. How'd I know? Marie paused. And what's the use of putting on something you gotta keep taking off all the time? Dewey never let me keep them on long enough to get used to them. Dewey who? This was somebody new to Pecola. Dewey who, chicken? You never heard me tell of Dewey? Marie was shocked by her negligence. No, ma'am. Oh, honey, you've missed half your life. Whoa, Jesus. 195. You talk about smooth? I met him when I was 14. We ran away and lived together like married for 3 years. You know all those clinger tops you see running up here? 50 of them in a bowl wouldn't make a Dewey Prince ankle bone. Oh Lord, how that man loved me. China arranged a fingerful of hair into a bang effect. Then, why he left you to sell tail? Girl, when I found out I could sell it, that somebody would pay cold cash for it, you could have knocked me over with a feather. Poland began to laugh soundlessly. Me too. My auntie whipped me good that first time when I told her I didn't get no money. I said, money for what? He didn't owe me nothing. She said, the hell he didn't. They all dissolved into laughter. 3 merry gargoyles, 3 merry harridans, amused by a long ago time of ignorance. They did not belong to those generations of prostitutes created in novels with great and generous hearts, dedicated because of the horror of circumstance to ameliorating the luckless, barren life of men, taking money incidentally and humbly for their understanding. Nor were they from that sensitive breed of young girl gone wrong at the hands of fate, forced to cultivate an outward brittleness in order to protect her springtime from further shock, but knowing full well she was cut out for better things and could make the right man happy. Neither were there the sloppy, inadequate whores who, unable to make a living at it alone, turned to drug consumption and traffic, or pimps to help complete their scheme of self-destruction, avoiding suicide only to punish the memory of some absent father or to sustain the misery of some silent mother. Except for Marie's fabled love for Dewey Prince, these women hated men, all men, without shame, apology, or discrimination. They abused their visitors with a scorn grown mechanical from use. Black men, white men, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, Jews, Poles, whatever, all were inadequate and weak. All came under their jaundiced eyes and were the recipients of their disinterested wrath. They took delight in cheating them. On one occasion, the town well knew, They lured a Jew up the stairs, pounced on him. All three held him up by the heels, shook everything out of his pant pocket, and threw him out of the window. Neither did they have respect for women, who, although not their colleagues, so to speak, nevertheless deceived their husbands regularly or irregularly, it made no difference. Sugar-coated whores, they called them, and did not yearn to be in their shoes. Their only respect was for what they have described as good Christian colored women, the women whose reputation was spotless and who tended to her family, who didn't drink or smoke or run around. These women had their undying, if covert, affection. They could sleep with their husbands and take their money, but always with a vengeance. Nor were they protective and solicitous of youthful innocence. They looked back on their own youth as a period of ignorance and regretted that they had not made more of it. They were not young girls in whores' clothing or whores regretting their loss of innocence. They were whores in whores' clothing, whores who had never been young and had no word for innocence. With Pecola, they were as free as they were with each other. Marie concocted stories for her because she was a child, but the stories were breezy and rough. If Pecola had announced her intention to live the life they did, they would not have tried to dissuade her or voiced any alarm. You and Dewey Prince have any children, Miss Marie? Yeah, we had some. Marie fidgeted. She pulled a bobby pin from her hair and began to pick her teeth. That meant she didn't want to talk anymore. Pecola went to the window and looked down at the empty street. A tuft of grass had forced its way up through a crack in the sidewalk, only to meet a raw October wind. She thought of Dewey Prince and how he loved Miss Marie. What did love feel like, she wondered. How do grown-ups act when they love each other? Eat fish together? Into eyes came the picture of Charlie and Mrs. Breedlove in bed. He making sounds as though he were in pain, as though something had him by the throat and wouldn't let go. Terrible as his noises were, they were not nearly as bad as the no noise at all from her mother. It was as though she was not even there. Maybe that was love. Choking sounds and silence. Turning her eyes from the window, Pecola looked at the women. China had changed her mind about the bangs and was arranging a small but sturdy pompadour. She was adept in creating any number of hairstyles, but each one left her with a pinched and harassed look. Then she applied makeup heavily. Now she gave herself surprised eyebrows and a cupid bow mouth. Later, she would make oriental eyebrows and an evilly slashed mouth. Poland, in her sweet strawberry voice, began another song. I know a boy who is soft, sky soft brown. I know a boy who is sky soft brown. I know a boy who is sky soft brown. The dirt leaps for joy when his feet touch the ground. I know a boy who is sky soft brown. I know a boy who is sky soft brown. The dirt leaps for joy when his feet touch the ground. His strut is a peacock, his eye is burning grass. His smile is sorghum syrup dripping slow, sweet to the last. I know a boy who is sky soft brown. I know a boy who is sky soft brown. Marie sat shelling peanuts and popping them into her mouth. Pocola looked and looked at the women. Were they real? Mary belched softly, purringly, lovingly.
Do you ever wonder if there's something you can do to make this world a sacred space and live in truth? If you watch the birds, if you watch the bees, when you feel the sun, well, when you feel the breeze, you'll see they know what they're doing. You'll see, oh, 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 what about you? What about you? What about you? What about you? Can you feel what you're doing? Can you be what you're giving? Step completely as a warrior of love. With dignity, fight for love. Step completely as a warrior of love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely as a warrior of love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely as a warrior of love. Warrior with dignity, fight for love. Now I know time can get real hard. Willing to stand apart from the mess that we have made. It's up to you. What will you create? When you keep the flame, take the time to pray. Then you will understand. You're gonna completely warrior of love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely warrior of love. Walk with dignity, fight for love. Step completely warrior of love. Walk with dignity.
My daddy's face is a study. Winter moves into it and presides there. His eyes become a cliff of snow, threatening to avalanche. His eyebrows bend like black limbs of leafless trees. His skin takes on the pale, cheerless yellow of a winter sun. For a jaw, he has the edges of a snowbound field dotted with stubble. His high forehead is the frozen sweep of the Erie, hiding currents of gelid thoughts that eddy in darkness. Wolf killer turned hawk fighter. He works night and day to keep one from the door and the other from under the window sills. A Vulcan guarding the flames, he gives us instructions about which doors to keep closed or opened for proper distribution of heat, lays kindling by, discusses qualities of coal, and teaches us how to rake, feed, and bank the fire. And he will not unrazor his lips until spring. Winter tightened our heads with a band of cold and melted our eyes. We put pepper in the feet of our stockings, Vaseline on our faces, and stared through dark icebox mornings at 4 stewed prunes, slippery lumps of oatmeal, and cocoa with a roof of skin. But mostly, we waited for spring, when there would be gardens. By the time this winter had stiffened itself into a hateful knot that nothing could loosen, something did loosen it, or rather, someone. A someone who splintered the knot into silver threads that tangled us, netted us, and made us long for the dull chafe of the previous boredom. This disruptor of seasons was a new girl in school named Maureen Peel, a high yellow dream child with long brown hair braided into 2 lynch ropes that hung down her back. She was rich, at least by our standards, as rich as the richest of the white girls, swaddled in comfort and care. The quality of her clothes threatened to derange Frida and me. Patent leather shoes with buckles, a cheaper version of which we only got at Easter and which had disintegrated by the end of May. Fluffy sweaters, the color of lemon drops, tucked into skirts with pleats so orderly they astonished us. Brightly colored knee socks with white borders, a brown velvet coat trimmed in white rabbit fur, and a matching muff. There was a hint of spring in her slow green eyes, something summery in her complexion, and a rich autumn ripeness in her walk. She enchanted the entire school. When teachers called on her, they smiled encouragingly. Black boys didn't trip her in the halls. White boys didn't stone her. White girls didn't suck their teeth when she was assigned to be their work partners. Black girls stepped aside when she wanted to use the sink in the girls' toilet, and their eyes genuflected under sliding lids. She never had to search for anybody to eat with in the cafeteria. They flocked to the table of her choice, where she opened fastidious lunches, shaming our jelly-stained bread with egg salad sandwiches cut into 4 dainty squares, pink frosted cupcakes, stalks of celery and carrots, proud dark apples. She even bought and liked white milk. Frida and I were bemused, irritated, and fascinated by her. We looked hard for flaws to restore our equilibrium, but had to be content at first with uglying up her name, changing Maureen Peel to meringue pie. Later, a minor epiphany was ours when we discovered that she had a dog tooth, a charming one to be sure, but a dog tooth nonetheless. And when we found out that she had been born with 6 fingers on each hand and that there was a little bump where each extra one had been removed, we smiled. They were small triumphs, but we took what we could get, snickering behind her back and calling her 6-finger dog tooth meringue pie. But we had to do it alone, for none of the girls would cooperate with our hostility. They adored her. When she was assigned a locker next to mine, I could indulge my jealousy 4 times a day. My sister and I both suspected that we were secretly prepared to be her friend, if she would let us. But I knew it would be a dangerous friendship, for when my eye traced the white border patterns of those Kelly green knee socks and felt the pull and slack of my own brown stockings, I wanted to kick her. And when I thought of the unearned haughtiness in her eyes, I plotted accidental slammings of locker doors on her hand. As locker friends, however, we got to know each other a little, and I was even able to hold a sensible conversation with her without visualizing her fall off a cliff or giggling my way into what I thought was a clever insult. One day, while I waited at the locker for Frida, she joined me. Hi. Hi. Waiting for your sister? Uh-huh. Which way do you go home? Down 21st Street to Broadway. Why don't you go down 22nd Street? 'Cause I live on 21st Street. Oh, I can walk that way, I guess. Partly, anyway. Free country. Frida came towards us, her brown stockings straining at the knees because she had tucked the toe under to hide a hole in the foot. Maureen's gonna walk part way with us. Frida and I exchanged glances, her eyes begging my restraint, mine promising nothing. It was a false spring day, which, like Maureen, had pierced the shell of a deadening winter. There were puddles, mud, and an inviting warmth that deluded us. The kind of day on which we draped our coats over our heads, left our galoshes in school, and came down with a croup the following day. We always responded to the slightest change in weather, the most minute shifts in time of day. Long before seeds were stirring, Frida and I were scruffing and poking at the earth, swallowing air, drinking rain. As we emerged from school with Maureen, we began to molt immediately. We put our headscarves in our coat pockets and our coats on our heads. I was wondering how to maneuver Maureen's fur muff into a gutter when a commotion in the playground distracted us. A group of boys was circling and holding at bay a victim, Piccola Breedlove. Bayboy, Woodrow Kane, Buddy Wilson, Junie Bug, like a necklace of semi-precious stones, they surrounded her. Heady with the smell of their own musk, thrilled by the easy power of a majority, they gaily harassed her. Blackie Mo, yada yada sleeps naked. Black Mo, your dad sleeps naked. Black Mo. They had extemporized a verse made up of two insults about matters over which the victim had no control, the color of her skin, and speculations on the sleeping habits of an adult, wildly fitting in its incoherence. That they were themselves Black or that their own father had similarly relaxed habits was irrelevant. It was their contempt for their own Blackness that gave the first insult its teeth. They seemed to have taken all of their smoothly cultivated ignorance, their exquisitely learned self-hatred, their elaborately designed hopelessness, and sucked it all up into a fiery cone of scorn that had burned for ages in the hollows of their minds, cooled and spilled over lips of outrage, consuming whatever was in its path. They danced a macabre ballet around the victim, whom, for their own sake, they were prepared to sacrifice to the flaming pit. Black Emo, your daddy sleeps naked. Stop, ta. Piccola edged around the circle, crying. She had dropped her notebook and covered her eyes with her hands. We watched, afraid they might notice us and turn their energies our way. Then Frida, with lips set and mama's eyes, snatched her coat from her head and threw it on the ground. She ran toward them and brought her books down on Woodrow Kane's head. The circle broke. Woodrow Kane grabbed his head. Hey, girl, you cut that out, you hear? I had never heard Frida's voice so loud and clear. Maybe because Frida was taller than he was. Maybe because he saw her eyes. Maybe because he had lost interest in the game. Or maybe because he had a crush on Frida. In any case, Woodrow looked frightened, just long enough to give her more courage. Leave her alone, or I'm going to tell everybody what you did. Woodrow did not answer. He just walled his eyes. Bayboy piped up. Go on, gal. Ain't nobody bothering you. You shut up, bullet head. I had found my tongue. Who you calling bullet head? I'm calling you bullet head, bullet head. Frida took Piccola's hand. Come on. You want a fat lip? Bayboy drew back his fist at me. Yeah, give me one of yours. You gonna get one. Maureen appeared at my elbow, and the boys seemed reluctant to continue under her springtime eyes, so wide with interest. They buckled in confusion, not willing to beat up three girls under her watchful gaze. So they listened to a budding male instinct that told them to pretend we were unworthy of their attention. Come on, man. Yeah, come on. We ain't got time to fool with them. Grumbling a few disinterested epithets, they moved away. I picked up Piccola's notebook and Frida's coat, and the four of us left the playground. Oh, bullet head, he's always picking on girls. Frida agreed with me. Miss Forrester said he had incorrigible. What? I didn't know what that meant, but it had enough of a doom sound to it to be true of Bayboy. While Frida and I clucked on about the near fight, Maureen, suddenly animated, put her velvet-sleeved arm through Piccola's and began to behave as though they were the closest of friends. I just moved here. My name is Maureen Peel. What's yours? Piccola. Piccola? Wasn't that the name of the girl in Imitation of Life? I don't know. What is that? The picture show, where this mulatto girl hates her mother because she is black and ugly, but then cries at the funeral. It was real sad. Everybody cries in it. Claudette Colbert, too. Oh, Piccolo's voice was no more than a sigh. Anyway, her name was Piccola, too. She was so pretty. When it comes back, I'm going to see it again. My mother has seen it 4 times. Frida and I walked behind them, surprised at Maureen's friendliness to Piccola, but pleased. Maybe she wasn't so bad after all. Frida had put her coat back on her head, and the two of us, so draped, trotted along enjoying the warm breeze and Frida's heroics. You're in my gym class, aren't you? Maureen asked Piccola. Yes. Miss Erkmeister's legs sure are bow. I bet she thinks they're cute. How come she gets to wear real shorts and we have to wear those old bloomers? I want to die every time I put them on. Piccola smiled but did not look at Maureen. Hey, Maureen stopped short. There's an Azaleas. Want some ice cream? I have money. She unzipped a hidden pocket in her muff and pulled out a multi-folded dollar bill. I forgave her those knee socks. My uncle sued Azaleas, Maureen said of the three of us. Maureen said to the three of us. He sued the Azaleas in Akron. They said he was disorderly, and that was why they wouldn't serve him. But a friend of his, a policeman, came in and bared the witness, so the suit went through. What's a suit? It's when you can beat them up if you want to, and won't nobody do nothing. Our family does it all the time. We believe in suits. At the entrance to Azaleas, Maureen turned to Frida and me asking, You all going to buy some ice cream? We looked at each other. No, Frida said. Maureen disappeared into the store with Piccola. Frida looked placidly down the street. I opened my mouth, but quickly closed it. It was extremely important that the world not know that I fully expected Maureen to buy us some ice cream, that for the past 120 seconds, I had been selecting the flavor, that I had begun to like Maureen, and that neither of us had a penny. We supposed Maureen was being nice to Piccola because of the boys, and were embarrassed to be caught, even by each other, thinking that she would treat us, or that we deserved it as much as Piccola did. The girls came out, Piccola with 2 dips of orange pineapple, Maureen with black raspberry. You should have got some, she said. They had all kinds. Don't eat down to the tip of the cone, she advised Piccola. Why? Because there's a fly in there. How you know? Oh, not really. A girl told me she found one in the bottom of hers once, and ever since then, she throws that part away. Oh. We passed the Dreamland Theater, and Betty Grable smiled down at us. Don't you just love her? Maureen asked. Uh-huh, said Piccola. I differed. Hedy Lamarr is better. Maureen agreed. Ooh, yes. My mother told me that a girl named Audrey, she went to the beauty parlor where we lived before and asked the lady to fix her hair like Hedy Lamarr's. And the lady said, yeah, when you grow some hair like Hedy Lamarr's. She laughed long and sweet. Sounds crazy, said Frida. She sure is. Do you know she doesn't even menstruate yet? And she's 16? Do you yet? Yes, Piccola glanced at us. So do I. Maureen made no attempt to disguise her pride. 2 months ago, I started. My girlfriend in Toledo, where we lived before, said when she started, she was scared to death. Thought she had killed herself. Do you know what it's for? Piccola asked the question as though hoping to provide the answer herself. For babies. Maureen raised 2 pencil stroke eyebrows at the obviousness of the question. Babies need blood when they're inside of you. And if you are having a baby, then you don't menstruate. But when you're not having a baby, then you don't have to save the blood, so it comes out. How do babies get in the blood? Asked Piccola. Through the like line, where your belly button is. That is where the like line grows from and pumps the blood to the baby. Well, If the belly buttons are to grow like lines to give the baby blood, and only girls have babies, how come boys have belly buttons? Maureen hesitated. I don't know, she admitted, but boys have all sorts of things they don't need. Her tinkling laughter was somehow stronger than our nervous ones. She curled her tongue around the edge of the cone, scooping up a dollop of purple that made my eyes water. We were waiting for a stoplight to change. Maureen kept scooping the ice cream from around the cone's edge with her tongue. She didn't bite the edge as I would have done. Her tongue circled the cone. Pecola had finished hers. Maureen evidently liked her things to last. While I was thinking about her ice cream, she must have been thinking about her last remark, for she said to Pecola, Did you ever see a man naked? Pecola blinked, then looked away. No, where would I see a naked man? I don't know. I just asked. I wouldn't even look at him, even if I did see him. That's dirty. Who wants to see a naked man? Pecola was agitated. Nobody's father would be naked in front of his own daughter, not unless he was dirty too. I didn't say father. I just said a naked man. Well, how come you said father? Maureen wanted to know. Who else would she see, Dogtooth? I was glad to have a chance to show anger, not only because of the ice cream, but because we had seen our own father naked and didn't care to be reminded of it and feel the shame brought on by the absence of shame. He had been walking down the hall from the bathroom into his bedroom and past the open door of our room. We had lain there wide-eyed. He stopped and looked in, trying to see in the dark room whether we were really asleep, or was it his imagination that opened eyes were looking at him. He moved away, confident that his little girls would not lie open-eyed like that, staring. When he had moved on, the dark took only him away, not his nakedness. That stayed in the room with us, friendly like. I'm not talking to you, said Maureen. Besides, I don't care if she sees her father naked. She could look at him all day if she wants to. Who cares? You do, said Frida. That's all you talk about. It is not. It is so. Boys, babies, and somebody's naked daddy. You must be boy crazy. You better be quiet. Who's going to make me? Frida put her hand on her hip and jutted her face toward Maureen. You already made. Mammy made. You stop talking about my mama. Well, you stop talking about my daddy. Who said anything about your old daddy? You did. Well, you started it. I wasn't even talking to you. I was talking to Pecola. Yeah, about seeing her naked daddy. So what if she did see him? Pecola shouted, I never saw my daddy naked. Never. You did too, Maureen snapped. Bay Boy said so. I did not. You did. I did not. Did. Your own daddy, too. Nicola tucked her head in, a funny, sad, helpless movement, a kind of hunching of the shoulders, pulling in of the neck as though she wanted to cover her ears. You stop talking about her daddy, I said. What do I care about an old black daddy? Asked Maureen. Black? Who you calling black? You. You think you so cute. I swung at her and missed, hitting Pecola in the face. Furious at my clumsiness, I threw my notebook at her, but it caught her in the small of her velvet back, for she had turned and was flying across the street against traffic. Safe on the other side, she screamed at us, I am cute, and you ugly, black and ugly blackimos. I am cute. She ran down the street, the green knee socks making her legs look like wild dandelion stems that had somehow lost their heads. The weight of her remarks stunned us, and it was a second or two before Frida and I collected ourselves enough to shout, Six-fingered dog-tooth meringue pie. We chanted this most powerful of our arsenal of insults as long as we could see the green stems and rabbit fur. Grown people frowned at the three girls on the curbside, two with their coats draped over their heads, the collars framing the eyebrows like nuns' habits, black garters showing where they bit the tops of brown stockings that barely covered the knees, angry faces, knotted like dark cauliflowers. Piccola stood a little apart from us, her eyes hinged in the direction in which Maureen had fled. She seemed to fold into herself like a pleated wing. Her pain antagonized me. I wanted to open her up, crisp her edges, ram a stick down that hunched and curving spine, force her to stand erect and spit the misery out on the streets. But she held it in where it could lap up into her eyes. Frida snatched her coat from her head. Come on, Claudia. Bye, Piccola. We walked quickly at first and then slower, pausing every now and then to fasten garters, tie shoelaces, scratch, or examine old scars. We were sinking under the wisdom, accuracy, and relevance of Maureen's last words. If she was cute, and if anything could be believed, she was, then we were not. And what did that mean? We were lesser, nicer, brighter, but still lesser. Dolls we could destroy, but we could not destroy the honeyed voices of parents and aunts, the obedience in the eyes of our peers, the slippery light in the eyes of our teachers when they encountered the Maureen Peels of the world. What was the secret? What did we lack? Why was it important? And so what? Guileless and without vanity, we were still in love with ourselves then. We felt comfortable in our skins, enjoyed the news that our senses released to us, admired our dirt, cultivated our scars, and could not comprehend this unworthiness. Jealousy we understood and thought natural, a desire to have what somebody else had. But envy was a strange new feeling for us. And all the time we knew that Maureen Peel was not the enemy and not worthy of such hatred. The thing to fear was the thing that made her beautiful and not us. The house was quiet when we opened the door. The acrid smell of simmering turnips filled our cheeks with sour saliva. Mama! There was no answer but a sound of feet. Mr. Henry shuffled part of the way down the stairs. One thick, hairless leg leaned out of his bathrobe. Hello there, Greta Garbo. Hello there, Ginger Rogers. We gave him the giggle he was accustomed to. Hello, Mr. Henry. Where's Mama? She went to your grandma's. Left word for you to cut off the turnips and heat some graham crackers till she got back. They in the kitchen. We sat in silence at the kitchen table, crumbling the crackers into anthills. In a little while, Mr. Henry came back down the stairs. Now he had his trousers on under his robe. Say, wouldn't you all like some cream? Oh, yes, sir. Here's a quarter. Go on over to Italy's and get yourself some cream. You been good girls, ain't you? His light green words restored color to the day. Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Henry. Will you tell Mama for us if she comes? Sure, but she ain't due back for a spell. Coatless, we left the house and had gotten all the way to the corner when Frida said, I don't want to go to Italy's. What? I don't want ice cream. I want potato chips. They got potato chips at Italy's. I know, but why go all that long way? Miss Bertha's got potato chips. But I want ice cream. No, you don't, Claudia. I do too. Well, you go on to Italy's. I'm going to Miss Bertha's. But you got the quarter, and I don't want to go all the way up there by myself. So let's go to Miss Bertha's. You like her candy, don't you? It's always stale, and she always runs out of stuff. Today is Friday. She orders fresh on Friday. And then that crazy old soaphead Church lives there. So what? We're together. We'll run if he does anything to us. He scares me. Well, I don't want to go up to Italy's. Suppose meringue pie is hanging around. You want to run into her, Claudia? Come on, Frida. I'll get candy. Miss Bertha had a small candy, snuff, and tobacco store. One brick room sitting in her front yard. You had to peep in the door, and if she wasn't there, you knocked on the door of her house in back. This day, she was sitting behind the counter reading a Bible in a tube of sunlight. Frida bought potato chips, and we got 3 Powerhouse bars for 10 cents and had a dime left. We hurried back home to sit under the lilac bushes on the side of the house. We always did our candy dance there so Rosemary could see us and get jealous. The candy dance was a humming, skipping, foot tapping, eating, smacking combination that overtook us when we had sweets. Creeping between the bushes and the side of the house, we heard voices and laughter. We looked into the living room window, expecting to see Mama. Instead, we saw Mr. Henry and two women. In a playful manner, the way grandmothers do with babies, he was sucking the fingers of one of the women, whose laughter filled a tiny place over his head. The other woman was buttoning her coat. We knew immediately who they were, and our flesh crawled. One was China, and the other was called the Maginot Line. The back of my neck itched. These were the fancy women of the maroon nail polish that Mama and Big Mama hated, and in our house. China was not too terrible, at least not in our imaginations. She was thin, aging, absent-minded, and unaggressive. But the Maginot Line, that was the one my mother said she wouldn't let eat out of one of her plates. That was the one churchwomen never allowed their eyes to rest on. That was the one who had killed people, set them on fire, poisoned them, cooked them in lye. Although I thought the Maginot Line's face, hidden under all that fat, was really sweet, I had heard too many black and red words about her, seen too many mouths go triangle at the mention of her name to dwell on any redeeming features she might have. Showing brown teeth, China seemed to be genuinely enjoying Mr. Henry. The sight of him licking her fingers brought to mind the girly magazines in his room. A cold wind blew somewhere in me, lifting little leaves of terror and obscure longing. I thought I saw a mild lonesomeness cross the face of the Maginot Line, but it may have been my own image that I saw in the slow flaring of her nostrils, in her eyes that reminded me of waterfalls in movies about Hawaii. The Maginot Line yawned and said, "Come on, China, we can't hang here all day. Them people be home soon." She moved toward the door. Frida and I dropped down to the ground, looking wildly into each other's eyes. When the women were some distance away, we went inside. Mr. Henry was in the kitchen, opening a bottle of pop. "Back already?" "Yes, sir. Cream all gone?" His little teeth looked so kindly and helpless. Was that really our Mr. Henry with China's fingers? "We got candy instead." "You did, huh? Old sugar tooth Greta Garbo." He wiped the bottle sweat and turned it up to his lips, a gesture that made me uncomfortable. "Who were those women, Mr. Henry?" He choked on the pop and looked at Frida. "What you say?" "Those women," she repeated, "who just left. Who were they?" "Oh," he laughed, a grown-up getting ready to lie laugh. We knew well. "Those were some members of my Bible class. We read the scriptures together, and so they came today to read with me." "Oh," said Frida. I was looking at his house slippers to keep from seeing those kindly teeth frame a lie. He walked towards the stairs and then turned back to us. "Bet not mention it to your mother. She don't take so much Bible study and don't like me having visitors, even if they're good Christians." "No, sir, Mr. Henry, we won't." He rapidly mounted the stairs. "Should we?" I asked. "Tell Mama?" Frida sighed. She had not even opened her Powerhouse bar or her potato chips, and now she traced the letters on the candy wrappers with her fingers. Suddenly, she lifted her head and began to look all around the kitchen. "No, I guess not. No plates are out." "Plates? What are you talking about now?" "No plates are out. The Maginot Line didn't eat out of one of Mama's plates. Besides, Mama would just fuss all day if we told her." We sat down and looked at the graham cracker anthills we had made. "We better cut off the turnips. They'll burn and Mama will whip us." She said, "I know. But if we let them burn, we won't have to eat them." Hey, what a lovely idea, I thought. "What you want? A whipping and no turnips, or turnips and no whippings?" "I don't know. Maybe you could burn them just a little so Mama and Daddy can eat them, but we can say we can't." "Okay." I made a volcano out of my anthill. "Frida." "What?" What did Woodrow do that you was gonna tell? Wet the bed. Mrs. Kane told Mama he won't quit. Oh, nasty. The sky was getting dark. I looked out of the window and saw snow falling. I poked my finger down into the mouth of my volcano and it toppled, dispersing the golden grains into little swirls. The turnip pot crackled.
They come from Mobile, Akin, from Newport News, from Marietta, from Meridian, and the sound of these places in their mouths make you think of love. When you ask them where they are from, they tilt their heads and say Mobile, and you think you've been kissed. They say Akin, and you see a white butterfly glance off a fence with a tore wing. They say Nagadocious, and you want to say, yes, I will. You don't know what these towns are like, but you love what happens to the air when they open their lips and let the names ease out. Meridian, the sound of it opens the windows of a room like the first four notes of a hymn. Few people can say the names of their hometowns with such sly affection, perhaps because they don't have hometowns, just places where they were born. But these girls soak up the juice of their hometowns and it never leaves them. They are thin brown girls who have looked long at hollyhocks in the backyards of Meridian, Mobile, Akin, and Baton Rouge. And like hollyhocks, they are narrow, tall, and still. Their roots are deep, their stalks are firm, and only the top blossom nods in the wind. They have the eyes of people who can tell what time it is by the color of the sky. Such girls live in quiet Black neighborhoods where everybody is gainfully employed, where there are porch swings hanging from chains, where the grass is cut with a scythe, where rooster combs and sunflowers grow in the yards, and pots of bleeding heart ivy and mother-in-law tongue line the steps and windowsills. Such girls have brought watermelon and snap peas from the fruit man's wagon. They have put in the window the cardboard sign that has a pound measure printed on each of the three edges, 10 pounds, 25, 50, and no ice on the fourth. These particular brown girls from Mobile and Akin are not like some of other sisters. They are not fretful, nervous, or shrill. They do not have lovely Black necks that stretch as though against an invisible collar. Their eyes do not bite. These sugar brown Mobile girls move through the streets without a stir. They are as sweet and plain as butter cake, slim ankles, long, narrow feet. They wash themselves with orange-colored Labao soap, dust themselves with cashmere boutique talc, clean their teeth with salt on a piece of rag, soften their skin with Jergens lotion. They smell like wood, newspaper, and vanilla. They straighten their hair with Dixie Peach and part it on the side. At night, they curl it in a paper with brown bags, tie a print scarf across their heads, sleep with their hands folded across their stomachs. They do not drink, smoke, or swear, and they still call sex nookie. They sing second soprano in the choir, and although their voices are clear and steady, they are never picked to solo. They are in the second row, white blouses, starch, blue skirts, almost purple from ironing. They go to land-grant colleges, normal schools, and learn how to do the white man's work with refinement. Home economics to prepare his food, teacher education to instruct Black children in obedience, music to soothe the weary master and entertain his blunted soul. Here they learn the rest of the lesson begin in those soft houses with porch swings and pots of bleeding heart, how to behave. The careful development of thrift, patience, high morals, and good manners. In short, how to get rid of the funkiness, the dreadful funkiness of passion, the funkiness of nature, the funkiness of the wide range of human emotions. Whenever it erupts, this funk, they wipe it away. Where it crusts, they dissolve it. Where it drips, flowers, and clings, they find it and fight it until it dies. They fight this battle all the way to the grave. The laugh that is a little too loud, the enunciation a little too round, the gesture a little too generous. They hold their behind in for fear for a sway too free. When they wear lipstick, they never cover the entire mouth for fear a lip's too thick, and they worry, worry, worry about the edges of their hair. They never seem to have boyfriends, but they always marry. Certain men watch them without seeming to, and know that if such a girl is in his house, he will sleep on sheets boiled white, hung out to dry on juniper bushes, and pressed flat with a heavy iron. There will be pretty paper flowers decorating the picture of his mother, a large Bible in the front room. They feel secure. They know their work clothes will be mended, washed, and ironed on Monday, and that their Sunday shirts will bellow on hangers from the door jamb, stiffly starched and white. They look at her hands and know what she will do with biscuit dough. They smell the coffee and the fried ham, see the white smoky grits with a dollop of butter on top. Her hips assure them that she will bear children easily and painlessly, and they are right. What they do not know is that this plain brown girl will build her nest stick by stick, make it her own inviolable world, stand guard over its every plant, weed, and dolly, even against him. In silence, she will return the lamp to where she put it in the first place, remove the dishes from the table as soon as the last bite is taken, wipe the doorknob after a greasy hand has touched it. A sidelong look will be enough to tell him to smoke on the back porch. Children will sense instantly that they cannot come into her yard to retrieve a ball. But the men do not know these things, nor do they know that she will give him her body sparingly and partially. He must enter her surreptitiously, lifting the hem of her nightgown only to her navel. He must rest his weight on his elbows when they make love, ostensibly to avoid hurting her breast, but actually to keep her from having to touch or feel him too much. When he moves inside of her, she will wonder why they didn't put the necessary but private parts of the body in some more convenient place, like the armpit, for example, or the palm of the hand. Someplace one could get to easily and quickly without undressing. She stiffens when she feels one of her paper curlers coming undone from the activity of love. Imprints in her mind which one it is that is coming loose so she can quickly secure it once he is through. She hopes he will not sweat. The damp may get into her hair, and that she will remain dry between her legs. She hates the gooking sound they make when she is moist. When she senses some spasm about to grip him, she will make rapid movements with her hips, press her fingernails into his back, suck in her breath, and pretend she is having an orgasm. She might wonder again for the 600th time what it would be like to have that feeling while her husband's penis is inside her. The closest to it was the time she was walking down the street and her napkin slipped free of her sanitary belt. It moved gently between her legs as she walked, gently, ever so gently, and then a slight, distinctly delicious sensation collected in her crotch. As delight grew, she had to stop in the street, holding her thighs together to contain it. That must be what it is like, she thinks, but it never happens while he is inside her. When he withdraws, she pulls her nightgown down, slips out of bed, and into the bathroom with relief. Occasionally, some living thing will engage her affections. A cat, perhaps, who will love her order, precision, and consistency, who will be as clean and quiet as she. The cat will settle quietly on the windowsill and caress her with his eyes. She can hold him in her arms, letting his back paws struggle for footing on her breast and his forearms cling to her shoulder. She can rub and smooth the fur and feel the unresisting flesh underneath. At her gentlest touch, he will preen and stretch and open his mouth. She will accept the strangely pleasant sensation that comes when he wriggles beneath her hand and flattens his eyes with a surface of sensual delight. When she stands cooking at the table, he will circle about her shanks, and the trill of his furrow spirals up her leg to her thighs to make her fingers tremble a little in the pie dough. Or as she sits reading the uplifting thoughts in the Liberty magazine, the cat will jump into her lap and she will fondle that soft hill of hair and let the warmth of the animal's body seep over into the deeply private areas of her lap. Sometimes the magazine drops and she opens her legs just a little, and the two of them will still be together, perhaps shifting a little together, sleeping a little together until 4 o'clock when the intruder comes home from work, vaguely anxious about what's for dinner. The cat will always know that he is the first of her affections, even after she bears a child. For she does bear a child easily and painlessly, but only one, a son named Junior. One such girl from Mobile, or Meridian, or Acken, who did not sweat in her armpits nor between her thighs, who smelled of wood and vanilla, who made souffles in the home economics department, moved with her husband, Louis, to Lorain, Ohio. Her name was Geraldine. There she built her nest, ironed shirts, potted bleeding hearts, played with her cat, and birthed Louis Jr. Geraldine did not allow her baby Junior to cry. As long as his needs were physical, she could meet them, comfort and satiety. He was always brushed, bathed, oiled, and should. Geraldine did not talk to him, coo to him, or indulge him in kissing bouts, but she saw that every other desire was fulfilled. It was not long before the child discovered the difference in his mother's behavior to himself and the cat. And as he grew older, he learned how to direct his hatred of this mother to the cat and spent some happy moments watching it suffer. The cat survived because Geraldine was seldom away from home and could effectively soothe the animal when Junior abused it. Geraldine, Louis, and Junior and the cat lived next to the playground of Washington Irving School. Junior considered the playground his own, and the school children coveted his freedom to sleep late, go home for lunch, and dominate the playground after school. He hated to see the swings, slides, monkey bars, and seesaws empty and tried to get the kids to stick around as long as possible. White kids. His mother did not let him play with niggers. She had explained to him the difference between colored people and niggers, and they were easily identifiable. Colored people were neat and quiet. Niggers were dirty and loud. He belonged to the former group. He wore white shirts and blue trousers. His hair was cut as close to his scalp as possible to avoid any suggestion of wool. That part was etched into his hair by the barber. In winter, his mother put Jergens lotion on his face to keep the skin from becoming ashen. Even though he was light-skinned, it was possible to ash. The line between colored and nigger was not always clear. Subtle and telltale signs threatened to erode it, and the watch had to be constant. Junior used to long to play with the black boys. More than anything in the world, he wanted to play king of the mountain and have them push him down the mound of dirt and roll over him. He wanted to feel their hardness pressing on him, smell their wild blackness, and say, "Fuck you," with that lovely casualness. He wanted to sit with them on the curbstones and compare the sharpness of jackknives and the distance and arches of spitting. In the toilet, he wanted to share with them the laurels of being able to pee far and long. Bayboy and PL had at one time been his idols. Gradually, he came to agree with his mother that neither Bayboy nor PL were good enough for him. He only played with Ralph Nizinski, who was 2 years younger, wore glasses, and didn't want to do anything. More and more, Junior enjoyed bullying girls. It was easy making them scream and run. How he laughed when they fell down and their bloomers showed. When they got up, their faces red and crinkled. It made him feel good. The nigger girls he did not pick on very much. They usually traveled in packs. And once when he threw a stone at some of them, they chased, caught, and beat him witless. He lied to his mother, saying Bayboy did it. His mother was very upset. His father just kept on reading the Lorraine Journal. When the mood struck him, he would call a child passing by to come play on the swings or the seesaw. If the child wouldn't or did and left too soon, Junior threw gravel at him. He became a very good shot. Alternately bored and frightened at home, the playground was his joy. On a day that he had been especially idle, he saw a very black girl taking a shortcut through the playground. She kept her head down as she walked. He had seen her many times before, standing alone, always alone, at recess. Nobody ever played with her. Probably, he thought, because she was ugly. Now, Junior called to her. "Hey, what are you doing walking through my yard?" The girl stopped. "Nobody can come through this yard unless I say so." "This ain't your yard, it's the school's. But I'm in charge of it." The girl started to walk away. "Wait," Junior walked toward her. "You can play in it if you want to. What's your name?" "Bacola, I don't want to play." "Come on, I'm not going to bother you." "I got to go home." "Say, you want to see something? I got something to show you." "No, what is it?" Come in my house. See, I live right there. Come on, I'll show you." "Show me what?" "Some kittens. We got some kittens, and you can have one if you want." "Real kittens?" "Yeah, come on." He pulled gently at her dress. Bacola began to move toward his house. When he knew she had agreed, Junior ran ahead excitedly, stopping only to yell back at her to come on. He held the door open for her, smiling his encouragement. Bacola climbed the porch stairs and hesitated there, afraid to follow him. The house looked dark. Junior said, "There's nobody here. My mom's gone out and my father's at work. Don't you want to see the kittens?" Junior turned on the lights. Bacola stepped inside the door. How beautiful, she thought. What a beautiful house. There was a big red and gold Bible on the dining room table. Little lace dollies were everywhere, on the arms, on the back of chairs, in the center of a very large dining table, on little tables. Potted plants were on the windowsill. A color picture of Jesus Christ hung on the wall with the prettiest paper flowers fastened on the frame. She wanted to see everything slowly, slowly. But Junior kept saying, "Hey, you, come on, come on." He pulled her into a room even more beautiful than the first. More dollies, a big lamp with green and gold base and white shade. There was even a rug on the floor with enormous dark red flowers. She was in deep admiration of the flowers when Junior said, "Here." Bacola turned. "Here is your kitten," he screeched. And he threw a big black cat right in her face. She sucked in her breath in fear and surprise and felt the fur in her mouth. The cat clawed her face and chest in an effort to right itself, then leaped nimbly to the floor. Junior was laughing and running around the room, clutching his stomach delightfully. Bacola touched the scratched place on her face and felt the tears coming. When she started toward the doorway, Junior leaped in front of her. "You can't get out. You're my prisoner," he said. His eyes were merry but hard. "You let me go." "No." She pushed her down, ran out the door that separated the rooms, and held it shut with his hands. Bacola's banging on the door increased his grasping, high-pitched laughter. The tears came fast, and she held her face in her hands. When something soft and furry moved around her ankles, she jumped and saw it was the cat. He wound himself in and about her legs. Momentarily distracted from her fear, she squatted down to touch him, her hand wet from the tears. The cat rubbed against her knee. He was black all over, deep, silky black, and his eyes, pointing down toward his nose, were bluish green. The light made them shine like ice blue. Bacola rubbed the cat's head. He whined, his tongue flicking with pleasure. The blue eyes and the black face held her. Junior, curious at not hearing sobs, opened the door, and he saw her squatting down, rubbing the cat's back. He saw the cat stretching its head and flatten its eyes. He had seen that expression many times as the animal responded to his mother's touch. "Give me my cat," his voice broke. With a movement both awkward and sure, he snatched the cat by one of its hind legs and began to swing it around his head in a circle. "Stop that!" Pecola was screaming. The cat's free paws were stiffened, ready to grab anything to restore balance, and its mouth wide, its eyes blue streaks of horror. Still screaming, Pecola reached for Junior's head. She heard her dress rip under her arm. Junior tried to push her away, but she grabbed the arm which was swinging the cat. They both fell. In falling, Junior let go of the cat, which, having released in mid-motion, was thrown full force against the window. It slithered down and fell on the radiator behind the sofa. Except for a few shudders, it was still. There was only the slightest smell of singed fur. Geraldine opened the door. "What is this?" Her voice was mild, as though asking a perfectly reasonable question. "Who is this girl?" "She killed our cat," said Junior. "Look." He pointed to the radiator where the cat lay, its blue eyes closed, leaving only an empty, black, and helpless face. Geraldine went to the radiator, picked up the cat. He was limp in her arms, but she rubbed her face in his fur. She looked at Pecola, saw the dirty torn dress, the plaits sticking out on her head, hair matted where the plaits had come undone, the muddy shoes, where the wadded gum peeping out from between the cheap soles, the soiled socks, one of which had been walking down into the heel of the shoe. She saw the safety pin, holding the hem of the dress up. Up over the hump of the cat's back, she looked at her. She had seen this little girl all her life, hanging out the windows over saloons in Mobile, crawling out the porches of shotgun houses on the edge of town, sitting in bus stations holding brown bags and crying to mothers who kept saying, "Shut up." Hair uncombed, dresses falling apart, shoes untied, caked with dirt. They stared at her with great uncomprehending eyes that questioned nothing and asked everything. Unblinking, unabashed, they stared up at her. The end of the world lay in their eyes, and the beginning, and all the waste in between. They were everywhere. They slept six in a bed, all their pee mixing together in the night as they wet their beds, each in his own candy and potato chip dream. In the long, hot days, they idled away, picking plaster from the walls and digging into the dirt with sticks. They sat in their little rows on street curbs, crowded into pews at church, taking space from the nice, neat colored children. They clowned on the playground, broke things in dime stores, ran in front of you on the street, made ice slides on the sloped sidewalks in winter. The girls grew up knowing nothing of girdles, and the boys announced their manhood by turning the bills of their caps backward. Grass wouldn't grow where they lived. Flowers died. Shades fell down. Tin cans and tires blossomed where they lived. They lived on cold, black-eyed peas and orange pop. Like flies, they hovered. Like flies, they settled. And this one had settled in her house. Up and over the hump of the cat's back she looked. "Get out," she said, her voice quiet. "You nasty little black bitch. Get out of my house." The cat shuddered and flicked his tail. Pecola backed out of the room, staring at the pretty milk brown lady in the pretty golden green house who was talking to her through the cat's fur. The pretty lady's words made the cat fur move. The breath of each word parted the fur. Pecola turned to find the front door and saw Jesus. She saw Jesus looking down at her with sad, unsurprised eyes. His long brown hair parted in the middle. The gay paper flower was twisted around his face. Outside, the March wind blew into the rip in her dress. She held her head down against the cold, but she could not hold it low enough to avoid seeing the snowflakes falling and dying on the pavement.
Reading The Bluest Eye for this project was incredible because it felt almost for me like a craft class, because just the way that Morrison works at the sentence level, she packs so much into every sentence, every image. You have a sense that nothing at all is wasted. I have 2 young daughters, and my oldest is reading The Bluest Eye now. This is her second read of it. And each time it allows us to have a conversation about beauty and self-worth, and just the way the world throws different images at you. In the section that I read, Pacola talks about the Mary Janes and these visions and the images and wanting to disappear, and who has not felt that for different reasons. So reading it aloud was like, just like Pacola's neighbors, was like singing a song to myself, was a powerful reminder that I have this tool to pass on to generations in my family and to the young women in my family, but also this beautiful gift that Ms. Morrison has left us of her wisdom and her profound belief in the power of language, but also the power of owning who we are and claiming who we are and naming who we are.